All right, guys, I'm gonna let you guys come in. As soon as I went live, my eyes started burning. All right, I'm gonna let you guys come in. Okay. Come in real quick, guys. Blessings, blessings. So glad to see you guys coming in. Not sure why it's not letting me put the title in anymore. All right. All right, I'm gonna give it another minute, guys, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna give it another minute, then we're gonna go ahead and get started. I wanna let a few more people get the notification so they can log in. Gonna give it just 30 more seconds, and then we're gonna get started. Greetings, greetings. Hey Miami, how are you? Hey Harlem. Slay in your lane. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. Slay in your lane. This comes from my sister in Christ. She goes to my church called, her name is Shanithia Kendricks, and I forgot to get her. I'm so glad you said that, because, yeah, I want to make sure that I give her a shout out. Let me tell you guys how to get the shirts. Give me a second. Yeah. Give me a second, guys. Give me a second. Okay. Her website, I'm going to post it up in the comment section so you guys can go and get the shirt. If I say it, it's High Quality Chicks, but it's spelled high, H-Y. And so you probably won't get it. So, you can order my book on Amazon. All of my books are on Amazon, including my newest one. I haven't did a promotion or advertised it or a grand opening for it yet, but it is available on Amazon. It's called Microscribology. It's over 500 pages, and it's dealing with the spiritual realm. When it comes to writing a book, it tells you why you deal with writer's block. It tells you why some people go through warfare when they write. This, I can say this is the most powerful book I've ever written. Absolutely the most powerful book I've ever written. It's over 500 pages, and it's absolutely amazing. I would tell you guys, if you're planning on get it tonight, because I'm going to be taking the price up. Everybody's been really going off on me about how low the price is, and I agree. So I'm going to be taking the price up by $10. So make sure if you're going to get it tonight. Make sure you're going to get it tonight, because I'm going to probably raise up the price tonight. But it's called Microscribology. Micro, M-I-C-R-O, scribology is one word. So, okay, let's go ahead and start talking. Of course, obviously, what made me want to come out and talk to you guys was this whole R. Kelly scandal. You know, everybody's talking about what's going on with R. Kelly, you know, this thing that's happening with the children. And I haven't seen the documentary. I got it pulled up online. I finally downloaded a site called, well, I didn't download the site. I got a membership at the site called fobu.tv. So I got a trial membership so that I can watch the documentary, since I have cable, but I haven't watched cable in so long. I don't know how to get it to come on my television, and I've tried and tried and tried, and I can't get it to come on. So I went online to see how I can watch it online. I found this site called fobu.tv, and I got the free, I have the free trial, 7 days. So I'm going to watch it. And then once I finish watching, I think I've watched probably 20 minutes of one of the first one tonight. But once I finish watching it, then I'm going to downgrade the membership, going to cancel my membership. I just want to get in there and get that. I don't encourage people to do that, but yeah, $40 a month. I'm not trying to do that. So with that being said, I wanted to come out and talk to you guys about just different types of abuse. We're going to talk today about child abuse, physical abuse, and we're going to talk about sexual abuse. Obviously, we're going to talk about those. I wrote some notes down. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to finish writing the notes because I realized that it was pretty late or what have you. And sometimes God just speaks to me late. And so, long story short, I wrote some notes down, but anyhow, whatever else I didn't write down, I do believe is in my heart. God said, if you open your mouth, He will fill it. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be talking about the different levels of abuse. Because here, the thing is, I realize many of you have been abused. Some of you have spoken out against your abuse. You've spoken out against your abusers. And some of you have yet to speak out. You have remained silent. This is especially true when it comes to sexual abuse. A lot of us who grew up, who have endured or survived sexual abuse, especially if it was in a family, we learned to keep quiet. That became something that was normal to us. And so we're going to deal with that tonight, about the normality of so many different things, because unfortunately a lot of bad things have become normal in our society, or they become normal in certain communities. And so when something becomes normal, it just happens. And so a lot of times kids, for example, in poverty stricken areas, they are subjected to a lot of sexual abuse, and just a bunch of anything sexual. They're subjected to a lot of that, and it has become so normal to them that when you come along, or like when the teacher starts talking about sexual abuse, or people being sexually abused, they kind of tune out and they can take a nap, because it's just so normal to them. It doesn't sound like it's something that is bad or what have you, because it's normal. In a lot of communities or small cities where there is high levels of sexual abuse, they're not going to talk about it so much in school, because it's normal in the community. The teachers are not going to speak out. It's something that's normal in the community. People know each other. It's something that's normal in the community. And the same thing, and I told you guys before, when it comes to physical abuse, I was in a marriage where I was physically abused. And the crazy part was, even though it wasn't necessarily normal to me, the thing was, abuse was normal to me. This is the crazy thing. Abuse was normal to me, so much so I had this misunderstanding of what abuse was. And I think a lot of children have a misunderstanding of what sexual abuse is, but I had a misunderstanding of what abuse was. I used to think abuse was that little weak woman that, curled up in the corner and put her hands over her head, and a man just came and punched her for no reason, and she's saying stop. But because I fought back, because I didn't curl up in a corner, I didn't know I was being abused. I thought it was just, he lost his temper again, and now he's over here swinging, or not so much as swinging, because in all our honesty, he wasn't the type person who would punch. He was more of a choker. Now, I'm going to be really honest and transparent with you guys on tonight, so that some of you can get free. I really didn't want to tackle this subject, and I think that's the reason why it took me so long to write my notes, because when the Lord dealt with me about it, I just felt like I don't want to really jump on that bandwagon. Everybody's talking about this whole R. Kelly stuff. Everybody's talking about, I don't like to jump on bandwagons. I pretty much like to kind of stay away from what everybody else is talking about. And so pretty much all day I was just trying to think about, what am I going to come out and talk to my sisters and brothers about tonight, or what have you, and God just didn't let up. And so again, abuse was normal to me. Even though it wasn't good, I wasn't one of those women who looked at it and said, oh, he loves me. I wasn't one of those women who looked at it and said, this is good or anything like that. I looked at it as, I don't like this and this has to stop. But abuse, just abuse in general, I was used to being abused in my lifetime. I had never truly experienced true, authentic love. And I think that's true for so many people. And so right now what we see, anytime we see a sexual predator that is broadcast on the television set, or we see something about any form of abuse, a lot of times, believe it or not, there are some people in some communities who are looking at the television set and they actually get mad at the predator, at the victim. And the reason is, when you see a person getting mad at the victim, is because it's normal in their family or is normal in their community. That's the reason they get mad at the victim, is because it's normal in their family and it's normal in their community. And so what we see is a lot of people expressing like their disdain for people who have come out and spoken against R. Kelly, and that's because that's normal for them. It's normal in their family. It's normal in their community. And I don't want to jump the bandwagon, but I'll just say this. In a lot of communities, especially a lot of African American communities, I can't say anything about Caucasian communities or Asian communities because I don't know. But I can speak to the community I came out. But in a lot of African American communities, just anything sexual is normal. It's considered normal. So I grew up. I remember being a teenager. I grew up listening to R. Kelly, where he came out when I was a teenager. And so, like so many other people, those songs led me into some dark places. They have something going on. You just have to Google it, sis. But those songs led me in some dark places. And guess what? A lot of women were actually molested to those songs. If we can be honest and transparent, we're going to get free tonight. A lot of us were molested to those songs. It was something that, music made sex so normal that it's hard to really think about, because you don't sit up in a corner and think, wow, was that wrong? Especially if it's something that's common in your family. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and go ahead and jump into the message. So we're going to start off, and we're going to deal a little bit with physical abuse. I think we're going to start off with physical abuse. Let me make sure. No, we're going to start off with child abuse. We're going to start off with child abuse, not sexual child abuse, but we're going to talk about child abuse a little bit, because I do understand that, especially in the African American community, we have blurred the lines between discipline and abuse. And for that reason, we don't have, a lot of times we're not raising our children to be successful. We're not raising our children to reach their fullest potential. We're raising our children to defend us. We're raising our children to defend their families. We're raising our children to just be defensive and offensive, but we're not necessarily raising our children to go out there and to take over, to go out there and to pave a way and to do something healthy. As a matter of fact, in a lot of African American communities, one of the things that, and I'm going to just be really transparent with you guys tonight, and I know that I'm probably going to step on a few feet, but I got to love my sisters and brothers enough to say the truth. But the reality is, in a lot of African American communities, we have allowed so many things to happen, and we've allowed the black tag to be attached to so many negative things, like being loud or abusive and stuff like that. We've allowed that to be associated with being black. And basically, we've allowed people to kind of just orchestrate this, or to design this idea that African or African American culture is a culture of ignorance, being loud, abusive, sexual perversion, and that's not the truth. And so this is something that we have tolerated for many, many, many years. And a lot of times these things don't come out until somebody in the white community comes out and says something, because in the African American community, all too often we oppress one another. We silence each other. I'll say this, for example, when it comes to children, and let's just venture over there into sexual abuse. I came from Mississippi. Now in Mississippi, sexual abuse is normal. As a matter of fact, pedophilia is normal. Incest is normal, or it was normal. And even though your family knew it was bad, it was one of those things that people didn't necessarily talk about. But if you were to dare tell on an uncle, you were to dare tell on a family member who was doing that to you, you weren't going to get the best response. You weren't going to get that support. Like, nobody was going to call 911 and try to defend you or something like that. So a lot of times what happened in the African American community is we learn to either protect ourselves, or we submitted to the abuse. We learn to protect ourselves, or we submitted to the abuse. So let's go ahead and move on, guys. We'll touch on that because I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So Google defines abuse as, number one, use something to bad effect, or for a bad purpose. Misuse, it means to misuse. Make excessive and habitual use of drugs, alcohol, especially illegal ones. And next, treat a person or an animal with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. Those are the definitions for abuse. Now, we understand that there are different levels of abuse. You can abuse people, you can abuse animals. There's child abuse, elderly abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, drug and alcohol abuse. Now, obviously, drug and alcohol abuse is really just an abuse of self. It's we call it drug and alcohol abuse, but it's really an abuse of self. Victims of crime.org reports the following. Number one, 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys are a victim of child sexual abuse. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys are victims of child sexual abuse. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Those numbers, I don't believe them. I believe that they're a lie, and that's because of where I've come from. I believe that these are the reported cases, but I believe that more than 50% of cases don't go reported. And that's because, again, a lot of us come from families and communities where this is considered normal. I want you to think about the Catholic Church. Those kids were being molested for years. And so after a while, even though they didn't like it, it was considered normal. And that's a sexual predator's dream, is to get you to a place where something becomes normal to you. And once it becomes normal, you no longer look at yourself so much as a victim. You look at yourself as, hey, listen, this is just something that's happening to me, what have you. So again, 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys are victims of child sexual abuse. I don't believe those numbers. I don't even believe it's one, because I remember I read something one time, it was like 1 in 3 girls. But in all out honesty, from my experience, from the friends I've had over the course of my life, from the women I've met, I can say that I genuinely believe, I would say 1 in 3 girls or 50% of women have dealt with some form of sexual abuse. If they haven't dealt with it physically, they've dealt with it, listening to it verbally. But most women have dealt with it on some level. I've always said this. It is a dangerous thing to be born with a vagina. And now we're starting to see that they're coming for the boys as well. But it's a dangerous thing. It is really important for a father to protect his daughter. It is very important for a father to protect his daughter. So let's go ahead and move on. And of course, this information again comes from victimsofcrime.org. The next one is self-report studies show that 20% of adult females and 5 to 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault or sexual abuse incident. Again, that's 20% of adult females and 5 to 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault or sexual abuse incident. Again, those numbers are from people who report the crime. Those are not from the people who don't report them. Many of you who are listening in right now, you have never reported a crime. You've never opened your mouth and talked about something that has happened to you. During a 1-year period in the United States, 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. During a 1-year period in the U.S., 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. And so I want to kind of venture off. I knew we were supposed to be talking about child abuse, but we keep going over into sexual abuse. But I want to venture off, and I want to tell you guys some of the things that happen with children and rape. And I just want to help you to get smarter when it comes to raising your children. Because I had been, because pedophilia was normal in my family. Incest was normal in my family. I was the victim, but I'm now the victor, because I don't like the word victim. I was the victim of childhood sexual abuse. That's something that happened to me. I dealt with that in my family. And I've told the story before. When I was 10 years old, I ended up being raped by a boy in my neighborhood. He was a 13-year-old boy, and I had a family member who literally held me down. And anytime this guy would come over, and when I finally told my parents about it, I got scared one day. My dad confronted us about this boy coming over. He heard that the boy had been coming over to our house. And I thought my dad knew about it because of the way he was talking. He was like, I'm going to tell your mom or what have you. And I just broke down and told my dad what had been happening. Because my family lacked information, because they lacked knowledge, because they weren't bad people. The thing about it is, I've come to understand now that I'm a woman, now that I'm grown, they simply lacked information. They had been in Mississippi their whole lives. They came from a family, or they came from families where this type of behavior had been normal. So for them, a lot of times in African American communities, especially in the South, in places like Mississippi, if something happened to a child, a lot of times they didn't want to report it to the police, because you got to think about our ancestors, or just a generation or two right before us. There was so much racism going on in the South that, let's say, for example, in the 1930s or the 1940s, if uncle was to rape or molest one of the children, and he happened to be African American, the family felt protective over him because they were afraid that he would get lynched. They were afraid that he would go to jail and something would happen to him. And so they felt the need to protect him. And so what they would do oftentimes is they would just basically, try to deal with it in the family. And what happened was that left the child or the victim feeling unprotected, and it allowed the victimizer, the predator, to continue to victimize other children in the family. And that's something that was passed down. That mindset that we got to protect each other was passed down. So in the South, in places like Mississippi, you will find a lot of young girls who have been molested, or that generational curse is still continuing today, that they're still being subjected to sexual abuse. And then there's another thing, and I didn't write this down, so I want to make sure that I say it before I forget. But I often tell people there are different ways that a lot of times young girls, especially in the age range of 14 to 17, are raped. And a lot of times women don't necessarily know that they've been raped. Now, let me explain it to you this way. One of the ways I found that's common, there's one called a massage. I call it a massage rape. So when it comes to a massage rape, it's basically some boy saying, let me give you a massage. And a girl may resist for it. He's just like, listen, I just want to give you a massage. Oftentimes, this is when she's wearing a skirt. So he proceeds to massage her. He puts a lot of pressure on her. It's usually some young girl who has a big crush on some boy. And, she trying to prove it, because he'll say, oh man, I knew you were still a little girl. I'm just trying to give you a massage. I like to massage people or what have you. And I really like you. And he'll put pressure on her till she finally gives in and allows him to massage her. In some cases, he says, hey, lay belly down. And I've known many people that this happened to. This is the reason why I'm speaking on it. But he says, lay belly down. And the next thing you know, he's massaging her. He moves his way up to the thighs. And when she tries to resist, he puts more pressure on her. And before long, she's being raped. Before long, she finds herself a victim of being raped. So it doesn't matter how many times she stopped. One of the things about a predator is a predator can convince you that you haven't been raped. It is possible. A predator is so crafty. They've been doing it for so long that they can convince you that you haven't been raped. So he can get up and say, I just got so tempted, but I stopped because you said stop, or what have you. But in reality, he didn't stop when she said stop. He stopped because he finished. He stopped because he finished. And again, I have to just be really open with you guys on tonight, because I really want you ladies to get free. And for those of you who are dealing with perversion, maybe those of you who are tuned in and you're getting turned on, I really encourage you to get help. I really encourage you to get set free. Another form of rape that is really, really common amongst young girls, and I'm putting this out there so that as parents, you can raise your children and you can warn your children. We got to stop in a lot of our communities, not just African American community, but in every community, Latino communities, Caucasian communities, Asian communities. We got to stop being afraid to talk about sex with our children, because it has become so taboo that a lot of times our children learn outside, and they learn the hard way. So another form of rape that is really, really common, I call it, is basically just kissing. So it starts off where this boy and this girl are kissing. He says, you're my girlfriend. He keeps inviting her over. The girl comes over. He says, hey, wear that little pretty dress that I like, or wear that pretty skirt that I like, or what have you. And it just starts off as a kissing session. They're just kissing and kissing and kissing and kissing. And so when you're kissing, what ends up happening is the boy tries to lay you down. Now, the girl puts up a little bit of resistance. She's a young girl. She doesn't, she's, let's say, for example, a virgin. She's, determined to not have sex. And she says, no. He just says, no, I'm not trying to have sex with you. I'm not trying to do anything. So he convinces her, because he uses his words, but he convinces her and he lays her down. And so from there, he just keeps kissing her. He keeps kissing her, and the kissing can be light or it can be aggressive. In some cases, it can be a little bit aggressive, or it can get a little aggressive. He's gonna try to manage to, pry her legs open, and next thing you know, he'll insert himself. And when she starts trying to resist and what have you, he'll hurry up and finish. And then once he's done, he sits back and he'll get up and say, I see you weren't ready, so I stopped. But in reality, he didn't stop, he finished. So I have to be open and transparent about these things because honestly, they are normal in a lot of communities. This is actually very common in the United States of America. We're just now starting to talk about it because we have internet, because we have broad media, and people are getting bold enough, and people are rejected and hurt enough. Some people are bold enough, they've gotten healed, and they say, hey, I don't want it to happen to somebody else. And some people are rejected and they're hurting, and they're saying, hey, I need this pain to stop happening to me. People are getting bold enough to talk about it, but we have to start educating our children, because all too often young girls, in a lot of communities don't know about sex. And we have resisted sexual education in school, but I don't think that we should have sexual education in school. I think we should have sexual education at home. If we're going to have sexual education in school, it should be light. It shouldn't be swaying children toward sex or anything like that. But a lot of times, again, a lot of parents are not talking to their children about that, and for that very reason, a lot of young girls end up getting raped. A lot of young girls end up getting raped. So let's go back to the statistics. Victims of crime.org report the following. Next one is, during a 1 year period in the United States, 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. They said 16%. Again, those numbers are not true. They're talking about people who have actually reported the crime. And then at the same time, you got to understand, they do their statistics a lot of times in middle class communities. They're not necessarily coming to poverty stricken communities like ghettos or trailer parks and stuff like that, where you're going to see a whole lot of sexual abuse. Over the course of a lifetime, 28% of U.S. youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. It said 28%. I don't believe that number. I believe it's a lot higher. And the last one, children are most vulnerable to CSA between the ages of 7 and 13. They're most vulnerable. Sadly enough, one of the issues that we're having in the United States of America is the spirit of rejection is on the run. The spirit of abandonment is out there. It's wild. And so now what we have, there are a lot of parents, a lot of women especially, who are allowing their children to be sexually abused for the sake of them having a man. And this is something we don't like to talk about because it has become a taboo subject. They know that their daughter is being abused by their boyfriend. They suspect that their daughter is being abused by their boyfriend. They know that the guy has predatory nature, what have you. Yet and still, they continue to turn a blind eye in hopes that he won't walk away from the family, and they'll use excuses in their mind like, well, he provides for the family, he does this or he does that. I remember knowing a woman one time, and I used to really be on her because I could tell that being in a relationship was something that she made an idol out of. Like, she was determined, overly determined. And so she was, struggling financially and stuff like that. And all too often, we think that a man is the answer to the women. We think that a man is the answer to our financial woes. And so she didn't think anything differently. And this is one of the things I have a problem with a lot of women. I get really frustrated with my sisters who sit back, and when you go out there and get on public assistance, you're not doing anything to get off of it. Because what you're doing is limiting yourself and your children, not just to a community, but to a mindset. You're constantly limiting yourself and waiting on a man to come along and to rescue you. And that is an issue. But again, that is a generational issue. So in this particular case with this lady, I remember she had 3 children. She had 3 children, and I think all of her children has something going on with them, but what have you. But she had a young girl. Her daughter was about 7 years old. And I remember the lady, I would talk to her, a little bit, what have you. I minister to her. She would call me ever so often. But one particular time, she just went ghost. I hadn't heard from her in a long time. And all of a sudden, she popped back up. And she called me, and she was just talking about well, hey, I met this guy. And I said, really? She was like, yeah. And I think I had already saw him on her Facebook page. I saw her when she uploaded his picture as her profile picture. And I looked, I was like, oh gosh, she's up to this stuff again. I thought that woman had got delivered. I thought that woman was trying to push away from that. So long story short, I didn't say anything to her because, I believe with some people, you wait for them to come to you. You don't necessarily go to them and just start volunteering information. That sometimes it has to be invitation only. Some conversations with somebody that's really close to me, I can be, open and direct and just blunt. But with some people, it's just invitation only. So when it came to her, I remember when she called me up on the phone, she was telling me about him. I said, yeah, I saw his picture. She said, you did? She said, what did you think? And I said, you need to be really careful. Like I said, because of how I grew up, there are certain spirits that I recognize. And I'm going to tell you, that guy got some spirits of perversion on him. He got, I said, he a pervert. You got to watch him around your daughter. You got to watch it. And I'm just sitting there lining up. Now, mind you, I hadn't researched this guy. I don't know anything about this guy, or I didn't know anything about this guy. But, there's power. God will give you revelation. We have the Holy Spirit. So I sat back and I told her, I said, just looking at his picture, I could tell you that he'll molest a child. I could tell you that he's a pervert. He's not a good person. Because I'm the type of person, if you ask me the truth, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm going to ask you, do you really want it? But I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I told her, and I remember she got quiet. And at first I was thinking to myself, I done stepped on her foot. But then instead what she said to me was, oh, wow. She said, he actually did go to prison for child molestation. He just got out. I think she said he had served 10 years in prison for child molestation. And I was like, wow. I said, what? I said, but why would you have? Well, he says this and he says that, but, I think he's a changed person and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you don't bring people like that around your children. You don't bring people like that around your children. So again, her issue was she had made a relationship, or she made marriage, she made men an idol. Like she was looking for something or somebody to worship. And she was so determined to have a guy that she went and got this predator and was bringing him around her children, even though he had served time in prison. And so after I had that conversation with her, she went away. She didn't call me for like another month or two. And when she did call me again, it was after they broke up and she was angry. And that's when she started letting out, telling me all the stuff about him. You were right about him. You were this, you did. And she started naming all these things about him. And then not long after that, I see her re-upload his Facebook picture. They done got back together. And then she gets away from him again. And then it's like a month or so later, she calls me back again. And she's just like, you know what, he's this and that. I thought I loved him. What have you. And then finally, the last time I saw her, she had started dating a completely different guy who was actually a pagan. He was against God. He was worshiping some other deity. I remember, I don't remember the name of the deity, but he was worshiping some other deity. And she had started worshiping that same deity. And that's the crazy thing about idolatry, is that whenever there's a void, you're going to try to look for some type of way to fill that void. And all too often we think that if we can just get the void satisfied, we can satisfy all the other issues, or we can rectify all the other issues in our lives. And so a lot of times with mothers, a lot of mothers will sit back and allow their children to be molested because they think that it's going to satisfy another issue in their lives. Well, at least we're getting our bills paid, and I got molested, and I'm normal. I'm not absolutely crazy. We'll just get her some counseling someday or something like that. A lot of mothers just don't think it's a big deal. So let's go ahead and move on. Abuse is not only common in the United States, it has become somewhat normal in certain communities and families. It's a dangerous thing when abuse becomes normal. It is a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous thing when abuse becomes normal. For this reason, it is almost taboo to speak about abuse, especially in poverty-stricken and wealthy communities. Surprise, surprise. Sexual abuse is not just normal in poverty-stricken areas. A lot of times it's normal in some wealthy communities. But see, in wealthy communities, one of the things that they're bound by is people. So a lot of times with wealthy people, their image is everything. So that's one of the things that they really hammer home to their children, that, you can't go out here, you can't say anything, you can't do this, you can't do that, because we can lose everything we have. Do you want to end up living in a shelter? Do you want to end up living in a ghetto? And so a lot of times they'll scare their children. So the children are so bound by that they learn to be quiet because they live in the fear of daddy going to prison and them losing everything, or daddy committing suicide. So again, abuse is not only common in the United States, it has become somewhat normal in certain communities and families. And I found that it is normal in a lot of other countries as well, especially family abuse, sexual abuse amongst family members. I found that, having dealt with so many people from different countries, I found that it is normal in a lot of countries. And again, it's one of those things where the family pretty much silences you, because the family pretty much raises their children to see, hey, this is family. We all you got. Blood is thicker than water. If you open your mouth, if you do this, it's gonna break up the family. It's gonna be your fault, or what have you. And so that's the way that they're raised. Child abuse is almost triggered by anger. Now, when I talk about child abuse, I'm talking about physical. Child abuse is almost always triggered by anger, ignorance, which is a lack of knowledge, and a need by the parent to take control of a situation or of a child. Is always triggered by anger. And this is one of the things I encourage people to do when it comes to discipline, when it comes to children. I'm an advocate for corporal punishment. Surprise, surprise. I'm an advocate for corporal punishment. I'm for it, but I'm against child abuse. Because there is a difference between the two, but a lot of times people don't know the difference. But one of the things I always tell people is don't spank your children when you're angry. If you're gonna discipline your children, the thing that you have to do is you have to do it logically. That means that if my child come and punch a hole in the wall, and I'm sitting there and I get furious in that moment because I'm like, oh my God, I told you to stop doing that. I told you, then I got to pay all these bills right then and there. And one of the things, if I'm going to spank that child, one of the things I need to do is tell the child to go to the room. I need to tell that child to go to the room. I need to calm down. I don't care if it takes me 24 hours to calm down. It doesn't matter how long it takes me to calm down. I need to calm down, because one of the things I have to do is make sure that what I'm doing is disciplining my child. Discipline has a purpose behind it. The word discipline comes from the word disciple. It has a purpose behind it. And so I may see this child who's extremely gifted, extremely talented, but every child has sabotaging behaviors. The Bible says it this way: foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction or the rod of discipline will drive it far from them. So one of the things that I have to do as a parent, or if I was a parent, is I have to make sure that those self-sabotaging behaviors are dealt with. So if I notice that my child, for example, doesn't know how to don't know how to sit down, wants to be the star of every program, they want to get up and run around and play, and I'm steady saying, sit down, don't do all that running, stop. And they're tearing up stuff in my house. That's going to carry over into their adult life. Not only they're going to destroy my house, and I've seen parents like that. Not only will they destroy my house, but they're going to destroy every house I go into, which is going to limit what I can do in life, and it's going to limit what they can do in life. So I can't really take them much of anywhere because of their behavior. And so discipline is designed to really help them to become, strong, mature, wise adults who learn how to exercise self-control. But again, it's something that is taboo in a lot of communities and families. But it is something that's triggered by anger. Child abuse is triggered by anger, ignorance, lack of knowledge. Now let's talk about ignorance, because I want to deal with that, especially as it relates to a lot of our communities. When it comes to discipline within the African American community, a lot of times what we experienced child abuse. A lot of us did experience child abuse, and the thing is, it was normal for us. Again, it's a dangerous thing when abuse becomes normal. It was normal for us. Now, a lot of us got disciplined. Sometimes our parents disciplined us. Sometimes they abused us, and they just didn't know any better. It's not like they were bad people who were walking around trying to do stuff to hurt us. But the reality of it is, they just didn't know any better. And so, like for me, for example, my mom beat us with extension cords. An extension cord became something that was normal. And I was around so many other kids who had got the extension cord that, was just like, okay. But I remember hearing about in school that was child abuse. Now, it wasn't something I told my teachers or something like that, but I remember them talking about it. And I remember going home and telling my mom, hitting us with the extension cord is child abuse. And she was like, Is it? She said, no, it's not. And she would just go on and tell us, why she didn't think it was or what have you. And I remember being 12 years old or 13 years old, and I had got a whooping, and I went into the kitchen, and I went into the kitchen, and I got my, I went into the kitchen, and I picked up the phone, and I called the child abuse hotline, and I don't know how, because they didn't have call IDs then, but they called right back and scared the crap out of me. I called the child abuse hotline. I remember one time threatening to call them, and my mom told me to call. And right when I hung up the phone, she wore my behind out. Now, I will say this. I appreciate her for the discipline. I understand why she did the abuse, because she just didn't know any better. She didn't know, because this was something that was passed down. It was called a generational curse. She just didn't know. There's a line between discipline and abuse. She didn't know. So a lot of times my mom used to get us when she was angry. Now, my dad, he disciplined us. My dad would give us discipline, but it wasn't consistent discipline. So he would always use a belt. But my mom, she was determined to make us into the best that she knew how. But because of lack of knowledge, she, a lot of times would grab an extension cord or whatever she can get her hands on and wear our tails out. And so that's something that became normal to us. And as I was growing up, I just remember thinking about how I was going to beat my kids, because it was normal to me. And the thing is, it took me a while to kind of grow out of that. Now, I still believe in corporal punishment. One of the reasons that I am an advocate for corporal punishment is because I have a sibling, and I got a chance to see the difference. Like, my mom disciplined all three of her children on different levels, and I got a chance to see the effects of all of it. So when it came to my older brother, he got his tail wore out. He got the most whoopings. However, for whatever reason, those whoopings didn't do too much of any good. And I think it was because it wasn't so much as consistent, because they couldn't whoop him as much as they needed to whoop him, because my brother he rarely went an hour without doing or saying something that he shouldn't have did or said. So usually those are really smart kids who act like that. And so my parents just, a lot of times they just kind of gave in or what have you. When it came to me, my parents were pretty consistent. And then when it came to my little sister, my parents whatever reason, they just felt like, well, we don't really want to spank her. We don't really want to discipline her. So she can probably count on both of her hands the number of times that she actually got a spanking. And so one of the things I got a chance to see was the difference between me and her. We are as different as night and day when it comes to, the choices that we make in life and the things that we do, and even our perspective is completely different. And so she dealt with entitlement, and she still does. She's still struggling with that. She dealt with entitlement so much so, and she doesn't understand the whole term consequence. She doesn't understand that life hurts until life bites her. And every time life bites her, she goes and she curls up into this victim mode or what have you. And that's because of how she was raised. So for me, I kind of picked that up. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to hit my kids with no extension cord. Obviously, I'm not going to do a lot of the things but I do believe in spanking children. But again, abuse has become normal in a lot of communities, and we don't speak about it. It's triggered by anger, ignorance, which is lack of knowledge, and a need for a parent to take control of a situation. And when I talk about a need for a parent to take control, what I found is that a lot of times one of the reasons children get abused is because the parents don't discipline them consistently. And if you don't discipline a child consistently, it builds up. And so a lot of times what happens is, I've seen this, with parents and stuff like that in my 20s. And the crazy thing is, now that I'm 41, I've seen the other side of discipline. I've seen the other side of what it looks like. I've seen what children look like that were not disciplined. I see how, I see the grown-up version of them. Because my friends, they were having kids when we were 18, 19, and 20. Now their kids are grown. And I've seen the kids that got disciplined. I've seen the ones who didn't get disciplined. I've seen the ones who didn't get consistent discipline. So I've gotten a chance to see the other side of that. And I found that you can genuinely predict how a child's going to turn out based on how disciplined or undisciplined they are. And so a lot of times what I found, I had those friends. I had the friends who were consistent disciplinary. They were consistent in their discipline. And their children a lot of times went to school. They made A's and B's and stuff like that. And these were the ones who sat down and explain to their children why they were getting a spanking. They were consistent with their discipline, and they got their children to the point where they didn't have to hit them as much as they had to look at them. They got them to the point, a lot of times we were raised like that. They got them to the point where they put the fear of God in that child so much that they can look at the child, and the child looks, and they know right then and there, let me stop. My mom had got us to that point. We could be in the store clowning, and my mom would look over at us, and we were like, oh, okay. Okay, but they got their children to the point. But I've also seen the ones who, and I always tell, like even now, I tell my friends who have kids, I'll tell them, stop all that yelling, because that's abuse in itself. What they'll do is they'll keep threatening the child. Keep doing it, I'm going to whoop you. If you keep it up, I'm going to whoop you. If you don't stop, I'm going to whoop you. If you don't do this, I'm going to whoop you. And it becomes something that the child is used to. Well, what happens in a case like that is that the mother becomes frustrated because the child gets to the point where your threats mean nothing because you always saying it. That's just something that come out your mouth. You ain't gonna do nothing. And so they've learned that 80-90% of the time that you're just gonna be talking or what have you. So they'll keep on pushing the parent and keep pushing the parent. They'll keep on, going, and they'll take it to the next level, until the parent says they've gone too far. And then finally, when the parent gets up to discipline the child, is usually when the child has done something major. And then the parent gets up and abuses the child because it's something that has pent up. And so one of the things I often tell parents nowadays, especially people that are around me, I tell them, be consistent. You never sit there and constantly tell a child, I'm going to whoop you. Then I say, sit down. If you don't sit down, I'll whoop you. Then I say, sit down. You don't constantly tell them, and you don't constantly do that. You have to have consistency as a parent. You have to be able to say, sit down. I told you to sit down. And then you have to follow it up with an action. Even if you say go to your room, go to the corner, whatever it is, it has to be followed up with an action. This has to be consistent to the point where the child understands that it is a law in the house. I tell people all the time, one of the most dangerous type of parents are parents who have no laws in their house, where the children are pretty much just free roam until I piss you off, until I get you angry enough, until I break something, until I do something major, until 911 is called on me. Those are the most dangerous type of parenting styles, because what happens with those children is they learn that there are rarely ever any consequences. And when they grow up, they think that the police department, they think that general society is going to have that same grace for them, and they don't. And so a lot of times they'll go out there and they'll do crazy stuff or what have you. And so again, a lot of times it's child abuse is triggered by a parent trying to take control of a situation. They allowed the child to sit at home and act a certain way. They allowed the child to do that, while they were young. Then the child gets 13 or 14 years old, and the child, now is the height, of the parent or what have you. Now the child decides, hey, I ain't gonna do nothing. I'll hit you in your face. Or the child gets up there and actually hits the parent back. I've seen this 100 times. Actually hits the parent back, and that's when the parent realizes that it's a big mistake. And I've seen parents do this. And one of the things, I got onto an old friend of mine some years ago. One of the things I used to hate to see her doing was when it came to her children, she would let them kind of be going to school and doing whatever they wanted to, talking to the teachers any kind of way. And then if the teacher really did anything, she would feel like the teachers were against her children. But one of the things I noticed about her was that she would not let them act any kind of way toward her. And that used to upset me. And I really came at her about it. I was like, it's funny. You don't mind them doing that to other people, but you will make sure they don't do it to you or what have you. So that's dangerous parenting. You have to understand that when you're growing something, you have to have some intentionality, and you got to have a purpose behind it. You got to have a picture in mind. Now, if your discipline or your method doesn't match the picture, then you are deceived. If you are sitting there thinking, I'm raising a doctor or a lawyer by knocking them out, then you are deceiving yourself. If you think that you're raising a doctor or lawyer by offering no discipline, then you are deceiving yourself. Discipline has to be consistent. If discipline isn't consistent, then abuse is inevitable, whether they get abused by you or they go out and they get abused by society. I found that children who didn't get discipline at home a lot of times are the ones who end up going out there getting into relationships where they get discipline because they mistake abuse for love. So let's go ahead and move on, guys. A lot of parents have traded their belts for their voices, and just like corporal punishment, they end up becoming verbally abusive, or they keep making empty threats. And we just got through talking about that. That is a form of abuse. I remember when I was married, and my ex's son had come to live with us. And I got to a point, I was disciplining him. And I got to the point where I remember my ex had nothing to say about it. He was like, no, get him. And my ex's, the mother of the child, she was like, no, I trust you, get him. Spank his behind, he act up, what have you. But my ex's family had started, intervening. They were starting to say their little bit, and they were talking to my ex and telling, I'll answer those questions in a second. But they were saying to my ex, she's not his mother, why you letting her hit on him and all this other stuff. And it made me feel bad because the whole term stepmother already has a negative connotation to it. I knew I loved him like he was my own son. I knew I wasn't trying to hurt him. I knew, I had a picture in mind in regards to what I was trying to do with him. But at the same time, I just remember getting to the point where I was like, I'm just not going to touch him. I'm not going to touch. I'm just going to yell. I'm just going to yell at him and just, tell him to stop. Now, mind you, at this time, he was, I think, 4 years old. And most of the family wouldn't watch him because they were saying that he was too bad. And he was, he just didn't respect adults. He had just came to live with us or what have you. And he would just tear your house to pieces. And so those same people who had something to say wouldn't watch him. Those same people who had something to say, if you asked them to watch him, they'd be like, no, he too bad. He too bad. But they were calling up my ex and saying, why you got her hitting on him and all this other stuff. So I said to my ex, I said, I'm not going to touch him because I don't want them type of problems, because it was already feeling some type of way with me being a step parent or what have you. I was already feeling some type of way about that. And I didn't like the negative connotation that came with it. So I didn't want it to be said that I didn't like him and didn't love him because I actually cherished him. That was my baby. And so long story short, what ended up happening was I started yelling a lot. Every place we went, I was just yelling, stop, put that down, stop, didn't I say stop? And I didn't realize how much I was yelling. I was starting to sound like those friends of mine who just absolutely annoy me when they call. And, it was just, didn't I say, stop it? And we were in the middle of Sack and Save's grocery store one day, and he was just going up, and I remember he would walk up to these little candy displays, and we see him with his back turned, and he'd just be over there chewing. And then you turn him around, what you got in your mouth? What you got in your mouth? Open your mouth. You try to push the candy away or what have you. And I was yelling, and I remember my ex, I remember realizing then that I wasn't making things any better because now I was actually becoming what I was afraid that people saw me as. I was becoming abusive because I was yelling all the time. It was hardly a minute that went by that I didn't yell. So I was standing in the store and I started yelling. I was like, you're not standing still, no candy. You're not saying you candy. And my ex looked at me and he yelled and he said, stop screaming at him and whoop his butt. And right then and there, I remember feeling so bad. He said, stop yelling at him. Because he was tired of me yelling at his son. He was tired. He said, stop yelling and whoop his behind. He said, stop it. And so right then and there, that day I got over that. I took him home. I disciplined his little behind. I told him, I said, from this point on, I said, I'm going to get you. I said, because you're too smart to be going down that path, and I'm not going to watch you turn around and do all this crazy stuff. So you're going to listen. And it got to the point, by this time we'd had him about a month or so. He went from struggling in school to making A's and B's, saying yes ma'am and no ma'am. And those same people who didn't want to keep him, that was talking, when they did keep him, they said, what happened? This is like a different child. He's over here being respectful. He listened to people. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Because discipline became a law in our house. It wasn't an option. It wasn't just something that we talked about. Discipline became a law in our house. But again, there is a blurred line because a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference between the two. So corporal punishment is designed to teach children balance. Corporal punishment is designed to teach children balance. You see, children are representations of what flesh looks like when it's not crucified. Because that's all a child is. A child is, of course, they got a spirit, but they're being led by their flesh. So they are a representation of what flesh looks like uncrucified. They want candy. They want everything that their flesh. They want fun. They don't want to have to deal with anything hard. They are a representation of what flesh looks like crucified. That's not crucified. So the thing is, you're teaching them as children to not be led by their flesh. You're teaching them that, hey, when we go to the store, you're not going to get candy all the time, and you don't throw a fit, and you don't control mama with screaming. You're not going to humiliate me, because it becomes a power struggle. Because here's the thing, when it comes to children, a lot of times when a child starts screaming, let's say you're dealing with a child that's like 5 years old, and she gets into the store and she picks up a pack of candy, and you say no, and she starts screaming, you got to understand that the little girl is smart enough to she's smart enough to know that the screaming is really, well, the screaming is designed to basically embarrass you or get you to the point where you finally give in. So that's her way of disciplining you. That's her way of getting what she wants. And if you give in to that, you put your child in danger, because general society is not going to give her what she wants. General society, when she gets older, is not going to give her what she wants. And again, I've seen this in my own family. And I remember being younger and just really wanting my mom, like, Mom, you gonna have to get her. You got to get her, or what have you. But again, children are representations of what flesh looks like when it's not crucified. Flesh is attracted to pleasure. But it is the pangs we've experienced in life that teaches us that not all pleasure is long-lived, or is it worth the price tag. It's not worth it. So as a child, because my parents would discipline, and sometimes they would abuse me, but what have you. My mom, like I said, she just didn't know any better. That was her form of discipline. But as a child, I learned to measure things. See, that's the purpose of discipline. And that was what my mom, her goal was. I learned to measure things. So I count on as a child that if I do this, this is what happens. I learned consequence. And the thing is, when a child does not learn consequence, then the child does not expect any consequences. So they'll start becoming risk takers, who make a lot of unwise decisions, and they'll do something that puts them in danger. So I learned consequence. But it's the pangs in life that teaches us that not all pleasure is long-lived. For example, somebody running around having sex without a condom, you shouldn't be having sex at all if you're not married. But somebody who's going around there being promiscuous, eventually they learn the hard way that, hey, you're going to either get a baby or a disease. They learn the hard way that all pleasure is not long-lived, nor is it worth the price tag. Some things are good to you now, but you have to pay for it later. A good example is some foods that if you eat, later on, they're going to give you heartburn. And that's just a small token that you pay for it. Or if you deal with some major heartburn, that's going to be a big ticket that you pay. But at the end of everything, there is something called a consequence. Because children chase after pleasure, it is the responsibility of parents to ensure that they have something bitter on their plates. See, these are the type of things that are taboo and that we don't like to talk about, and we're uncomfortable talking about them. And, in a sense, you hear somebody talking about them and you think, oh my God, they're being really bad toward their children. It's not the case. Children chase after pleasure. It is the responsibility of the parents to ensure that they have something bitter on their plates, because the child is going to make sure that they got something sweet on their plates. It is your job to make sure you put some green peas on their plate. It is your job to make sure that you put something healthy on their plate, something that's going to be beneficial to them, and not necessarily just feed them what they want. The child is always going to go after sweet things. That's the same thing that we do in the flesh. We're always going after what's sweet tasting to us. We're always going after what's pleasurable to us. But oftentimes what God has to do is he puts something bitter on our plates. In Ezekiel 3:1 through 3, the prophet Ezekiel recounts an encounter he had with the Lord. It reads, moreover, he said unto me, the Lord said, moreover, the Lord said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, or eat this scroll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this scroll that I give thee. It says roll, but another translation says scroll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. And then I think I didn't write any further, but it starts talking about, but once it hit his belly, it became bitter. And you'll find a lot of things in the Bible where you'll find, I think, about 2 or 3 verses in the Bible where God had somebody to eat a scroll, and it was sweet in the mouth, but it was bitter in the belly. And that's how life is. There are a lot of things that's sweet. Fornication is sweet, and it feels good. It feels good not just to the physical sensories, but it feels good because it feels like love in the moment. It feels so good. It makes you feel loved. It makes you feel wanted. It temporarily appeases your voids. It does not heal your voids, but it appeases your voids and makes you feel some type of way. But eventually it's bitter because you have to deal with the consequences of it. And so again, God oftentimes he'll balance out our lives by giving us both pleasure and pain, or he'll allow us to chase after pleasure, but he'll put something bitter on our plates. This helps us to respect boundaries, and it essentially saves our lives. This is the reason why we discipline our children. We discipline our children because we don't want our children to catch a bullet. We don't want our children to go out here and do something that is going to cost them their lives. I'll give you guys a good example. My uncle Maddox Franklin, and you can look him up on the internet, but my uncle Maddox Franklin, now this is a generational curse that was in my family, but my uncle Maddox Franklin ended up marrying a woman. Now he was a baby, and I remember my mom there saying that my grandma would not discipline him. You know, he was my grandma's baby. I don't even think he was supposed to be born. I don't think my grandma thought she could get pregnant at that point. I don't remember what happened, but he was my grandma's baby. And what ended up happening with Mannix was Mannix ended up marrying a woman that he shouldn't have married. And Mannix went out there, and I can't say what happened because I wasn't there and I hadn't talked to him about it, but my relatives that lived in Milwaukee talk about how this woman allegedly was having an affair. And he went and got drunk one day. And my Uncle Mannix was really soft-spoken. He was the type person where he was not the loud person in the family. He wasn't really even a drinker, but he was the soft-spoken person. But he came home, and this is what I heard happen. So allegedly happened. He came home and he said to his wife, "Hey, I want to make love to you." So he was intoxicated, and he was like, "I want to make love to you. You won't let me touch you," and all this other stuff. And they got into an argument, and I think her relatives were over there, what have you. And he knocked a few items down, and then she called the police on him. Well, when the police came, he had already left the house, and he was hiding behind a parked car, I think. They called him out from behind a parked car, and he had his hands in his pockets. And the police told him to pull his hands out. He didn't pull his hands out of his pockets, so they lit him up. They shot him 7 times and took his life. And so I'm not going to say that's a picture of what it looks like to not be disciplined, but what I will say is that he made a bad choice that cost him his life. And so that's the whole purpose of discipline. Is I would rather give my child moderate pain. I would rather give my child merciful pain than allow somebody who does not love my child to attempt to discipline my child, because they don't love my child. They don't mind taking his life. They don't mind taking her life. They don't mind hurting my child. But that's the whole goal, was to, and I think we kind of lost the picture, or we've kind of lost, what is the word for that? We've kind of lost what it meant, or what discipline means, because of all these reports of kids getting abused and stuff like that. We've kind of lost what it means. And so it's to the point now where even now when I'm talking, some of you may be even getting offended because you think that, well, no, I just think you should send a child into timeout. Some children are too smart for timeout. I gotta say it that way. I don't know any other way to say it. Some children are absolutely too intelligent. The most violent predators that are in prison are the ones who are the most intelligent ones. The ones who create the biggest crimes are usually the most talented, creative people that you can ever meet. These are people with high IQs. And the thing about it is when you're dealing with a child who has a high IQ, they like to play with their mindsets. They like to play with psychology. You know, they like to play, okay, let me see how smart I am. Let me, see if I can get my mama to do this. Let me see if I can get my daddy to do this. And when there is no discipline for that child, then they start tapping into that power, and they love what they can do with it. So instead of using that power for the right thing, they use it for the wrong thing. There was a show called I Almost Got Away with It. I watched it some years ago, and I remember a lot of those criminals, they would go out and do all kinds of crazy things. These were geniuses. They were smart, but they ended up getting caught. And the crazy thing was, they would break out of prison or they would get away. And all of a sudden, they decided to go on the straight and narrow, and they would build lucrative businesses. Some of them would build multi-million-dollar companies while they're on the run. The intelligence was there. The discipline that they got from the prison, or the fear of discipline, was enough to pull it out of them. The fear of the consequence was enough to pull it out of them. So while they're on the run, they realize I got to go on the straight and narrow. So they sit up there and they will build lucrative businesses and be on the run for like 10, 15, 20 years. And they've started families and they got these big, great businesses. And then all of a sudden they get caught and they have to go to prison. And, of course, then they're trying to say, well, I built this business and I've been a productive member of society for this long, but the law says, hey, yeah, but you still got to come back and pay for what you did 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. You still got to come back and pay for that. The issue was they weren't disciplined, or they probably dealt with abuse, but nobody took the time out to give them fair discipline. And when they had the discipline, they dealt with the discipline or the fear of the discipline, that was enough to pull out their potential. That's the whole purpose of discipline. Discipline pulls out your potential. It pulls out your potential. It makes you measure, okay, even though I'm smart enough to manipulate every last teacher in this classroom, even though I'm smart enough to manipulate every student in this classroom, because the thing about it is some kids are so smart that it becomes fun. It becomes a game. Let me play you. Let me play you. Let me see how far I can get with you. Psychology is a fun thing for them. Even though I'm smart enough, my parents are on to me. They've helped my teacher to get on to me, and they discipline me. What they're doing is teaching me, take that intelligence and use it for the right thing. Take it and use it for the right thing. But sometimes some parents get so fascinated with that in their children that they will raise that spirit up. And they will raise that spirit up that wants to use it and abuse it. And they'll just sit back and chill and let the child grow up. And the next thing you know, you got a criminal mind. You got somebody who's hacking into government systems and doing all types of crazy things when they could have used that intelligence for the right thing. So again, guys, the purpose of discipline is really to pull out your potential. When parents cross those blurred lines between discipline and abuse, they not only break their children, they break systems designed to help us resist temptation. For example, many people in our society are against corporal punishment, either because they've been abused or because they've never been disciplined. Two types of people are usually against corporal punishment: the ones who've been abused and the ones who've never been disciplined, or very rarely been disciplined. You will rarely find someone who has received healthy discipline and speak out against it. You will rarely find somebody who their parents spanked them, explained what was happening, educated them, loved on them, gave them rewards. A person who had healthy balance, you will rarely find them speaking out against their parents. You will rarely, as a matter of fact, if you ever talk to them about their discipline, you'll notice that they'll kind of go off into a daydream and smile, and they'll kind of laugh because, amazingly enough, that discipline made them feel loved. I found that children who were not disciplined, a lot of them, they didn't necessarily feel loved in their home. They didn't necessarily feel loved in their home. But you will find children who did go through the discipline, who got the consistent discipline as adults. Because as children, you're resisting, you're crying, you're screaming. But as adults, they'll say, man, I remember that time mama came up in there and she caught me doing this and she wore my tail out. Oh man, she went out there and got that switch. Yeah, she wore my tail out. Because it made them feel loved. It showed them that their mother was willing to expend energy, that she was willing to take her time. She was willing to hurt her own feelings and get past herself to correct them. And it made them feel some type of love. And so when you talk to them, you can, a lot of times we can sit around, a lot of us can sit around and talk about times when we got whoopings, times when we got discipline, or what have you. Now, me as a child, and we're going to go over into sexual abuse in a minute, but me as a child, because I had been sexually abused, sexually molested, sex was something that was not taboo or not abnormal to me. And one memory that I have is, I think I had to be about 5 years old, because my great grandma died when I was maybe 5 or 6. But I was at my great grandmother's house, and she had this little carport. I remember the cars being up in there. I remember it was an air conditioner. They had a window in the carport. It was an air conditioner. The corner of the air conditioner used to be really painful. Like if you hit your head on that thing or you hit your hand, that thing used to be, man, that thing was painful. But I just remember that air conditioner sticking out of there. And I had this cousin that I didn't see him too much or what have you. He was an older cousin of mine. And he came out. He was getting ready to go into the house. And I stood in the garage and I saw him. And this is no lie, I pulled my pants down and I called him by name. I said his name and I pulled my pants down. And he looked at me and he said, "Stay like that, I'll be right back." And he went and got my great grandma. And she came out the house with a switch. And I tried to hurry up and pull my pants up. And she was like, "Nah." And she caught me with my pants down and she wore my behind out. Now, I appreciate her for that. I appreciate her for that, even though I don't remember if she addressed the sexual thing, because it was obvious something had been happening to me. But she wore my tail out. She was teaching me that that is not right and that is not normal. She wore my little behind out. So again, a lot of times when we talk about those things, we can smile. When I think about that moment when I was telling my dad about that, I don't know why he didn't know about that or he just didn't remember, but I was telling him about that moment the other night, and I was smiling while I was telling him about it. I was laughing at it, talking about how I pulled my pants down. I called my cousin's name. I was like, "Tony." He looked at me. He was like, "I'll be right back." And he went in the house and he got my great grandmother or what have you. So let's go ahead and move on, guys. Overcoming parental abuse. Number one, how do you overcome parental abuse? Number one, talk to your parents about it. For those of you who are adults, a lot of times it is nice, or it is effective. It is something that helps you to heal when you talk to your parents. Because I found, like, when I was talking to my mom about a lot of the stuff that she did, I found that, in the beginning there was some resistance. She was a little angry with me. She felt like I was calling her a bad mother. And, she would cast herself as a victim. She would go all into all these different things. And then one day that broke. One day she just apologized, because she didn't realize that, I wasn't against her. I was against a lot of her methods. And so I would talk to her and I wasn't crying or yelling or cussing her out or saying, "You were horrible." I was just saying to her, I was like, "Mom, yeah, that wasn't normal. You shouldn't have did that." I said, "But I understand that happened to you." And I would ask her questions like, "So what happened to you as a child?" Or what have you. And I found that she was just repeating a cycle. So talk to your parents about it. Sometimes you can help them to heal. They can find out that something wasn't normal because your spirit will tell you that something isn't normal. So they know deep down within it's not normal, but it was something that they were taught. And so you can help sometimes to free them, but just simply having a conversation with them. Again, for me, I had to have several conversations with my mother. And I had to just endure, her getting offended sometimes, casting herself as a victim, and she would go through all these different things. And then one day it was like something hit her and she just said, "I'm sorry." And I was telling her about the many times I had been molested as a child, by her family members and, stuff that happened. And I said, "No, Mom, it's okay." She said, "No, it's not okay." She said, "I should have been there for you guys. I should have did this." It was in that moment that she just felt like she realized that, wow, hey, here I am. I'm thinking I've done my best as a parent, but I missed some things or what have you. And I told her, I said, "No, it's okay." I said, "I'm not mad at you or anything like that. I forgive you." I said, "I'm just telling you, these are the things that happened to me. These are the things that I had to get over. And at the same time, these are the things that you will catch me talking about, because that was a part of my healing, and it's my goal to help other people to heal. So I don't want you to feel some type of way about it." Overcoming parental abuse. The third one, the second one is get counseling. Talk about it. The Bible said that they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Get up and talk about it. And I know that's uncomfortable, but here's the thing. When you talk about something for the first time, especially something like physical or sexual abuse, it is going to be uncomfortable. But you have to get past that discomfort by talking about it. And you keep talking about it until it becomes a comfortable conversation. So for me, just talking about the stuff that happened to me was uncomfortable, and I did receive a lot of resistance when I first started. When I was younger, I just remember, and I told you guys this before, talking to this girl, and she's telling me all these bad things about her parents, and I'm like, "Girl, please, you got some great parents. You're about to go to school to become a doctor. Your parents have protected you. They've done this." And so I asked her, I said, "Have you ever been raped?" She was like, "No." I said, "Have you ever been molested?" She said, "No," because she was saying that her parents didn't let her go anywhere, and her parents, they're always calling her phone trying to see where she is, and she just felt like a victim. And I was trying to help her to see that, as oppressive as it feels, the reality is your parents have successfully protected you, even having to endure the accusations that you're launching against them. So I started telling her what I went through as a child, and I started telling her the many times that I had been molested, and the things that happened to me, the time when I was 10 years old, when I had been raped, and this guy raped me like 3 or 4 times, and my parents didn't know what to do about it, so they whooped my tail. And I was telling her all these stories about even as an adult, because if you deal with sexual abuse, here's the thing, that spirit gets in you and that stuff will follow. You have some kind of residue on you. So even as a young lady, I kept attracting sexual predators. And so I was telling her about that. And at first she was just like, wow, wow. Then after a while she was like, she said, you're lying. And I just remember, I was like, what? She said, you're not, no, that's not true. She said, there's no way nobody could have gone through all that you've gone through. And I said, exactly. I said, that proves to me that you have had a really sheltered and good life. Your parents have been awesome. My world is completely foreign to you. My world is completely foreign to you, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. And so appreciate your parents and what have you. I appreciate mine for everything I've gone through, because I've learned through the school of hard knocks and what have you. So let's talk about spousal abuse. Let's talk about spousal abuse, because let's go ahead. Let me see. I'm coming to see you guys' comments. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, we're going to talk about physical abuse, and we're going to be dealing with relational or spousal abuse. Most spousal or relational abuse occurs when two broken, rejected personalities come together. In spousal and relational abuse, you'll often find one or more of the following belief systems. Number one, this is normal. Both parties will oftentimes believe that abuse is normal. For the abused party, they may see it as normal, to be hit, abused, and what have you. Maybe they were abused at home. Their parents didn't know the difference between discipline and abuse. They didn't know how to blur the line, so it's something that's normal to them. And that's that. It's the person, the victimizer, the predator, sees it as normal because he feels or she feels like it's necessary to get you to act right. See, there are some people who are so broken and so rejected that they genuinely believe that in order to get you to act right, you have to be abused. See, there are some guys out there, for example, who think that all women are cheats. They've had some really horrible mothers. They've had some horrible childhoods and stuff, or horrible experiences with women, and they come to believe that women default to cheating. They believe that all women are going to do is cheat. They're going to disrespect you. They're going to dishonor you, and you have to kick their behind to keep them from doing so. I remember dating a guy like that. I dated him briefly, and as a young woman, again, one of the things that happens to you if you're a victim of childhood sexual abuse or any type of abuse, you have a tendency to attract those same type of people. So I met this guy, and I didn't stay with him very long, but this is the guy giving you guys a testimony. I'm not going to give that testimony again, but this is the guy that I told you guys tried to kidnap my behind after I broke it off with him. But one of the things that happened with him was I remember meeting a friend of his girlfriend. We were out riding around one day, and he introduced me to this girl, and I remember looking at her and thinking, wow, she's actually pretty. You can see she's pretty, but she was dressed like a hillbilly. And she had her hair pulled back in a ponytail, even though she had some pretty lengthy hair, and she just looked a little bit rough. And I was just sitting there staring at her thinking, man, do that girl her hair, put her on the right outfit, she'll be bad, or what have you. And when we got back to his house, I remember him saying, he said, she used to dress just like you too. And he said, my boy got a hold of her. He said he kicked that behind. He said he got her straight, and he said, and then one day he said when she got pregnant, he told her, he was like, either you go change the way you dress or I'm leaving you. I said, so, and I was such a firecracker. I was like, so basically what he did was he got her pregnant and threatened to make her a single mother if she didn't change her clothes. Like, he didn't say that while, before they started having sex or anything. He didn't say, hey, I like you, but I can't be with you while you're dressing like that, and give her the option. He waited till she got pregnant, and he had been hitting on her as well. And he was telling me that, and I guess he thought I was going to be like, wow. And I just started cursing and going off because I wasn't saved. I was like, I would have did this to him. I would have did that to him, or what have you. I just started going off. But he actually saw that as normal. He lived in a smaller town than I lived in. It was actually considered normal for him. So the day that he decided that he was going to start his training with me, or his attack against me, was the day I went to his house, and he got upset with me about something. He got into an argument about something dumb. We were talking about shaking baby syndrome, but we got into an argument about that. And I think I've mentioned this before. He called himself playing with me. He shook me, and I said, "Don't shake me. You'll give me shaking baby syndrome." And he started laughing, and then he got mad. He was like, "What you talking about?" And of course, he had been drinking a little bit. He was like, "You a grown woman. How you gonna get shaken baby syndrome? You ain't no baby. You ain't no baby." And I said, "Well, actually, shaken baby syndrome is just a term for it." I said, "But any adult can have it. As a matter of fact, it's actually common with elderly people." I said, "But because, children is more common with children, they call it shaken baby syndrome." But I didn't know the official term for it, but I said it's called shaken baby. But anybody can get it if you shake them. And I said it causes fluid retention around the brain. This is something, and I'm going to be honest, this is the reason why a lot of young women who are intelligent, a lot of young men who have a little sense in their head, they don't show people that they are, because people will, they get upset with you. They don't like you knowing, they say you a know-it-all. And that's one of the things that we've heard in the African American community. And sometimes we've had to dumb ourselves down just to have relationships with people. And so I remember after saying that, he got so mad, and he was like, he said, "You think you know everything?" And he just started cursing and talking and what have you. And I got mad, and I said, "You know what? Have a good life. I'm over it." I said, "It's over. I'm gone." And I grabbed my keys and tried to leave, and that's when he got up and got in my face and grabbed me by my arm and threw me on the bed and started telling me, "You ain't going nowhere. You ain't gonna leave me." And all he said, "I'm tired. Every time you get mad at me, you want to walk out of here." He said, "No, today this stuff stops." So he was already starting his own initiation process into his mindset, because you got to understand that everybody has their own world. So he was about to try to initiate me into his world, his psychotic world. And so for me, I was just like, "Oh, I ain't going in there." I was too much of a firecracker. So I talked my noise for a bit until I realized that, yeah, he a little bit crazier than you, and yeah, you about to get your butt kicked up in this room. And so I decided to try to get out of it another way. I remember he had a glass of, I think it was vodka or gin, but I think it was vodka. And he threw it up against the wall and broke it and all this other stuff. So I'm not going to tell that story in its entirety, but long story short, I just started crying and faking and all this other stuff just to get out of there. And I made him think that I was in love with him, and I hated to see what was happening. And I was like, "Yeah, but I just need to go home." But once I got out of there, I was done with him. And I ended that relationship. But the point is, for him, that was normal. And he's, for him, that was his world. That's the world he grew up in. And so what he was about to do was try to initiate me into that world. And a lot of times people who end up in those relationships, you go through an initiation process coming into that person's world. It's important for you to pay attention to the world that the person has created. This is why you take your time. This is why you don't rush into a relationship. This is why you don't allow somebody to rush you. You take your time and look so that you can see the world that person has created for himself or herself. Time always reveals the type of person that they are. But this is the reason why a lot of abusive people will try to rush you. So let's go ahead and move on. So again, in spousal and relational abuse, you'll often find one or more of the following belief systems. Number one, this is normal, and this is for both parties. Both parties believe that. Number two, he hits me because he loves me. This is the thought process oftentimes of the abuse partner. See, the thing about it is, I found that a lot of kids who are not disciplined, they think like that. And a lot of kids who have gotten abused think like that. You gotta understand that there's a medium in everything. There's a thing called discipline, there's a thing called undisciplined, and there's a thing called abuse. Discipline is in the middle. And so a lot of undisciplined children, and I've seen this in my own family, a lot of undisciplined children, they really think that abuse is normal because they weren't disciplined. And so for them, when somebody is kicking their behind or what have you, to them they think it's love. You see some people who have been abused their whole lives, they think it's normal or what have you. But oftentimes a person who's been abused thinks that the abuse is a reflection of love. And notice I said he hits me because he loves me, but she hits me because she loves me as well. We can, it's not gender specific. We know that abuse is more commonly initiated from a man against a woman, but it does happen from women against men as well. But I like to use a term where it's more common. Number three, it's my fault or I deserve this. One of the things about predators is a predator has a really, really they're really good at making you feel like you are the one that caused the abuse. It's your fault. As a matter of fact, most of the abuse that I endured as a child and that I endured even as an adult, I thought it was my fault. It took me years to find out that a lot of that wasn't my fault. So as a child when it came to sexual abuse. For example, I had been raped when I was 10 years old, and I told you guys, I had a family member who pretty much let the guy in the house and held me down for it. And when I told my parents whooped me. They made me feel like it was my fault. They whipped that family member as well, and they went told the rapist. They told his family, his parents, and his parents said, "We'll take care of him." But they didn't call 911 or what have you. But the bulk of the fault was put on me because I didn't say anything, or because my parents said you let him in the house, and I didn't let him in the house. But the bulk of the blame was put on me. And so the thing about it was, for me, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody, like when something bad happened to me or what have you. So I felt like I deserved what had happened to me. This is the way that I came, up. And so when I ended up getting raped as a young woman, I thought it's my fault. I thought it was my fault. I was like, yeah, this is my fault. I shouldn't have did this. I shouldn't have did that. Then when I turned around and got attacked, and I had a friend, a guy that attempted to rape me, I blame myself. Now, part of that was my fault. I shouldn't have went in his room. I should have exercised wisdom and what have you. But at the same time, I blame myself for it. So I never did report it. I was afraid that if I reported it. So I dealt with assaults and stuff like that, sexual predators, a lot as a young woman, and that, what have you. But a lot of times I felt like it was my fault. It was my fault. So when I got married and I started dealing with physical abuse, I thought it's my fault, because oftentimes I said something that I shouldn't have said. I stood in his face. I wouldn't back down. So I would oftentimes believe it was my fault. And of course, he's going to say it's your fault. You did this. I told you. I told you to leave me alone. I told you to get out of my face. I told you to stop talking. I told you to do this. I told you to do that. And so even though in the heat of the moment, I was angry and I would be saying and talking, when I started calming down, I realized my marriage was in danger. I realized everything was falling apart. I sat down and I said, in my heart, this is my fault. And I would oftentimes sit back and kind of coach myself and say, I shouldn't have got in his face. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. And that's true. A lot of the stuff I shouldn't have done, but at the same time, it's not a justification for abuse. It's never a justification for abuse. It took me years to realize that I was being abused. I didn't know it. Again, I used to think that abused people, the people who threw their arms up and fell on the floor and cried and said, stop hitting me or what have you. And that wasn't me. Even if I was on the floor, I was clawing and kicking and scratching. And so for me, a lot of times I just felt like we were fighting, because I grew up in a community where you saw women and men outside fighting. Sometimes the woman got the best of the man. Sometimes the woman got the best of the man. The woman got the best of the man. Sometimes the man got the best of the woman. But I grew up in a community, poor, poverty-stricken communities, where you see people outside occasionally fighting in the street. And so I thought it was my fault. Number 4. It's her fault. She deserves this. And that's the predator's thinking. Again, this is not gender specific. We can say it's his fault. He deserves this. So oftentimes people who are abusive, the predators, they feel like it's your fault because they deal with blame. And we talked about this on the last YouTube. The perverted form of a confession is blame. Perverted confession is blame. God told us to confess our sins one to the other. You're supposed to confess. If you fall into fornication, you're supposed to repent and confess. Confession helps you to take accountability. But what happens is a lot of women will go out there and they'll fornicate. And they won't tell anybody about it. They'll just go out there and they'll keep doing their thing or what have you. And they'll just pass off their behavior as normal. But it's not until the relationship ends that they'll sit back and they'll play the victim, and then they start blaming. He cheated on me. He did this. He did that. Well, he cheated on God when he slept with you. He wasn't consistent. He showed God that he couldn't wait till marriage to have sex. He wasn't going to cover you. So both of you, you're not the victim. Both of you are guilty in it, but because she's so used to playing the victim, and this is one of the things that's dangerous in the 21st century right now, is that we have a lot of men and women who are professional victims. And because of that, the woman goes around and she's constantly pointing the finger of blame. It is your fault. It's his fault. He left me. It's his fault. I just don't know why men keep leaving me. I'm a good woman. I cook, I clean, I'm faithful. I'm a good woman. And it's just like they don't want why these men don't want no good woman. Yes, they do. They just don't want you. Because you've already shown that you're not disciplined. And they know I can't trust you. They know I can't, listen, even though you got it in your mind, you're thinking in the moment, you're talking in the high of the moment that I'm going to be faithful. In the reality, they see that there's no discipline to you. They see that, hey, you're going to be a problem. You're going to be a problem. And so let's go ahead and move on, guys. Again, a predator oftentimes thinks it's her fault. Or if it's a female, she thinks it's his fault. He deserves this. So a woman, when she's abusing a guy, she'll think that he's cheating on her. She thinks, well, I hit him because he cheated. I hit him because this. I hit him because that. Abuse actually manifested in me the first time when I was married to my ex. You know, even though there was an abusive marriage, the first person to ever pass a lick was me. He wasn't the first person to pass a lick. Now, I stopped. I think I hit him 2 times. You know, and this is before we got married. I hit him twice. And after that, I saw that he hit back. I realized that hitting wasn't going to benefit me, so I stopped. But he didn't stop. So that was something that was manifested in me. And for me, I felt like he deserved it because of the things that he said. I felt like he deserved it or what have you. But I came to understand that you should never, ever in your life hit an adult. That is never okay. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they say. You have to determine that everything that a person does is a part of a conversation. You have to determine whether you like the conversation or not. So if I'm dealing with a man who's cheating on me, that's a conversation I don't like. So I'm going to talk to him and try to get him to stop. You need to get counseling. You need to get deliverance. You need to get this. And I'm going to walk away until you get all that. So I'm responding to the cheating by pulling myself out of it. I don't respond to the cheating by squaring up or what have you. Let's go ahead and move on. In spousal or relational abuse, you'll often find one or more of the following belief systems. Number 5, this will stop someday. This is the most common belief. Here's the thing about abusers. Predators often sell you a dream. They sell you this big, beautiful dream. And they start building this dream or this fantasy when you're courting them, when you're dating them. They start selling you this dream like when you're younger. This guy says, you know, I'm a really good singer, or I'm a good, well, more common. I played basketball at my school, and you know, they talking about, you know, one day they believe I'm gonna be playing with the NBA, or what have you. They sell you a dream, and they sell you this dream of you having this big house and this big car, or these nice cars, you being a woman on his arm, having this faithful relationship, having the 3 beautiful children. They sell you a dream, and so what they end up doing is, after they sell you the dream and after they had sex with you and they got you to invest in a relationship, because every relationship is only as strong as its investment. I need you guys to write that down somewhere. Every relationship is only as strong as its investment. For some of you, the only thing you have, or the only thing you realize that you have, is your body. So you invest your whole self into a relationship. You give a man your body when God told you not to give it. And so a lot of times with an abuser, he will wait for you to give him everything. To give him something that's valuable to you, even babysitting your children. You know that you're sitting there to give something valuable, and then from that point on, he can manifest. You know, he can start acting the way he wants to act, and then from there, he sells you the dream that it's going to stop. To make it stop, you got to stop doing the stuff that you're doing. This is the lie that you're told. To make it stop, you got to stop dressing the way you dress. You got to stop acting the way you act. You got to stop hanging with the people you hang with. You got to stop saying the things you say. To make it stop, you got to stop going to their church. To make it stop, you got to stop letting folks talk to you any kind of way. To make it stop, you better cook before I can't come home. To make it stop, you better have this house clean. To make it stop, it's so many different variables, so many different things that you're supposed to do. And I've spoken to guys, I've counseled couples where the man was abusing the woman. Again, it does happen from men to women and women to men, but I've come across it's more common with the man being the predator and the woman being the victim, even though it does happen. A lot of times men don't report it because they're embarrassed by it. But when I talk to abusers, oftentimes they have a belief that it's going to stop. The abuser believes it's going to stop, and the abuse victim believes it's going to stop. The abuser thinks the abuse victim, because they're so used to blaming people. My mama left me. My mama wasn't there. My daddy did this. My daddy rejected me. I was raised by my grandparents. I had this happen to me. Because they're so used to playing the victim, that the abuser oftentimes sees himself as the victim in a relationship. So he'll keep beating his wife. He'll keep doing it. He really thinks it's going to stop someday. He thinks that, at some point she going to get to this spot and she going to realize that I ain't playing with her. She going to realize that, ain't nothing good going to come of this. And so what he'll do is he'll threaten to leave her. Abusers oftentimes use different techniques to see, to grab some type of control. He threatens to leave. He threatens to cheat. Sometimes they'll threaten to cheat directly or indirectly. I've noticed that a lot of times when I'm counseling couples or married couples where the husband is threatening to cheat, is always indirectly. And so a lot of times I have to call them out on it because I've been through it before. But the guy say something like, I'm going to make up a name, Sherry. Sherry called my mother yesterday. And she, was telling my mom that, she's probably going to be moving back to town in probably about the next 3 or 4 months. And you like, why she calling your mom? I don't know, but my mom still dealing with it because, Sherry and I, we never really broke up. And I've said this before. This is a method of control. Sherry and I, we never really broke up. We just mutually decided, because everything is we. Everything is designed to make you feel like they have a stronger connection. Like Sherry's his soulmate. Sherry and him supposed to be together, versus you just lucked up and got him. And he said, well, we both mutually decided that it was in our best interest, since we were going to be living hundreds of miles or thousands of miles away, and we were young and what have you. We were in love, but we decided that it would be in our best interest to break up. I didn't want to hold her from her future, and I knew that she probably is going to go to school to become this or go to school to become that or what have you. And now she's accomplished some stuff, and we're now in a better spot. And so I think that's why she's calling. But like I told my mom, I'm with you. But this is designed to make you feel like there's somebody out there better suited. This is the abuser grabbing at control through a conversation. He's passively grabbing at control. Abusers use different methods. That's one of the methods they use. Screaming, threats of taking the children. I had a friend, I remember she had an abusive boyfriend, and he literally grabbed her daughter, even though it wasn't his daughter, grabbed her daughter, threw her daughter in the car and took off with her daughter. They use different forms of abuse to gain some type of control. And so oftentimes, again, abusers and abuse victims believe that it will stop someday. And I gotta tell you guys, it doesn't stop. Somebody who's going through this, make sure they're looking at this. It doesn't stop. Excuse me. I was in that marriage for 7 years. It doesn't stop. You live by a dream, you live by a fantasy, but it doesn't end. It only intensifies. It only gets worse. Toward the end of that marriage, it got to the point where I realized, and this is what happens to a lot of abuse victims, it got to the point where I realized that I was going to lose my life if I didn't get out. It got to the point where I realized I was going to be dead if I didn't get out. It really got to that point when he started getting even more, because they started intensifying, because they started really genuinely believing that, I choked you the last time, but that's not enough. It's not working because you're still talking like this and you're still doing this. You haven't learned your lesson yet. So they start to intensify their abuse. And so a lot of times what happens, and I'll say in the case with me, my ex got to the point where he got even more violent. He got to the point where the choking lasted a lot longer. It got to the point where he literally took a belt and beat me with a belt. And I had welts all over me from being hit with a belt or what have you. And so it got to the point where it got really, really, really crazy. It got really violent. And it was during that time I had a friend, her dad had killed her mother when she was younger. And she was on me like hotcakes. This man's going to kill you, Tiffany. This is what happened to my mother. You got to get out of this relationship. And so that season that she was in my life, I realized her purpose, her assignment in that season was to help me to see abuse for what it was and not what I thought it was. Because I was thinking that, I thought like most abuse victims. I thought, okay, he's a really good guy. And there's a monster in him. And so I learned to separate the abuser from the monster. I hated when the monster came for a visit. Because it was always two different sides. On this side, the person, him, he was the sweetest, most loving, most romantic guy you could ever meet. No, the most romantic. I mean, I was married to him for 7 years. And so he was a romanceaholic. You name it, he did it. He was a romanceaholic. into all of the, making sure you come home and, come home to bubble baths and, lighting candles and, speaking words of affirmation, telling you that you're beautiful, speaking to you while you sleep, saying you're beautiful. I love you. I don't know how I end up with somebody like you. I don't deserve you. He did those type of things, but whenever he got angry, it was a different person. And this is the problem with a lot of abuse victims, is they learn to separate the abuser from the monster. And so oftentimes what they do when you're trying to get them to leave, what they hear is you telling them to leave the person. See, you don't know Steve. We won't make up a name. You don't know Steve. Steve's an amazing guy. Steve, he cooks, he cleans, he takes care. He's a great father to the children. Steve does this, Steve does that. But at the same time, when he gets angry, but when they start talking about when he gets angry, they're not talking about Steve anymore. They're talking about the monster. They're talking about the monster. And so for them, when they come to you, they're not looking for you to tell them to leave Steve. They're saying, how do we get the monster out of Steve? How do we get Steve delivered? How do we get Steve set free? Is there a counselor that he can get? Is there somebody? Because I see his potential. I see the great person that he is. And that is the thing about an abuse victim, is that they've seen both sides of the person. They've seen the Jekyll and the Hyde, or what have you. So again, they always think that it will stop one day. The abuser's convinced that it will stop, and that's why he comes and he says, media portrays the abuser. He's like, I won't do it again. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And they do say that, but the reality is they believe it as well. They believe it as well, because they feel like, okay, I accomplished what I was supposed to accomplish. Hopefully you won't do what you did again. And a lot of times they don't like that side of themselves. And so the abuse victim oftentimes feels like, well, we just need to get him some help. He just needs some help. He's not a bad person. You don't know what he does for me. He's not a bad person. He's always massaging my feet. He's always telling me about stuff that happened to him. He told me about when his daddy did this to him. His dad was horrible. His mom was horrible. And so they spend their time thinking that it's going to stop. I just got to get him to help. And he spends his time thinking it's going to stop. I just got to get her to stop doing what she's doing. And then eventually they end up, one of them ends up killing the other person, or they go ahead and go their separate ways, what have you, and the abuser finds somebody else to abuse. Abusers, oftentimes, if they don't have people to abuse, they begin to abuse themselves through promiscuity, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and what have you. They don't stop abusing something. They will abuse something. They have to abuse something. Again, number 6, nobody cares. Abuse victims oftentimes believe that nobody cares about them. Nobody cares what happens to them. A lot of times they came from dysfunctional families, and the families have proven themselves to not be that caring or what have you. So they start genuinely believing that nobody cares. That was a word that haunted me in my childhood. That was a word that haunted me even as an adult. I will always hear the words, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what happens to you. Don't nobody care, or what have you. And this is one of the things I say about my mom. I'm so proud of her. I was so upset with her when I was growing up. When I got out of her house, I was angry with her. I was angry with a lot of the things that she did and she allowed us to go through. I was so angry with her that I didn't too much want to have too much of a relationship with her, even though my mom was, a sweetheart in a lot of ways and what have you. I didn't think my mom cared about me. When I grew up believing my mom didn't care anything about me. I grew up believing that my mom didn't love me. And so as a young woman, when I got out, I called her, what have you. I had a relationship with my mom, but I just didn't think she cared. And I had got to the point where I was no longer trying to impress her. But one particular time when I finally got a chance to see my mom care, to show that my mom cared, was one particular day when I was married and my mom came by my house and my ex wasn't at home, and I told her, and I had been going through the abuse for like 2 or 3 years at that point, and somehow I let it come out of my mouth, and I told her, and she flipped, and she went out of her way, and I got a chance to see my mom just really pushing and going out of her way trying to get me out of that relationship, and she was willing to put her life on the line trying to make sure that nothing happened to me. And that's when I really got a chance to see, and I found out, like, when I got older, and this is for some of you, when I got older, I used to say to my mom, I said, Mom, I didn't really think you cared, because you spent a lot of my childhood, you were giving my sister everything, and you were always giving her all of your undivided attention, and you were doing this and you were doing that. and I just didn't think you cared. And my mom said something to me, and I believe this is going to heal so many people. But my mom said, she said, I just didn't think you needed that. She said, I didn't think you needed all the attention. I didn't think she said, because you were always smart, you were always strong, you could take care of yourself, but I felt like your sister was weak and she needed me. And so that's the reason why I gave her all of, all the attention and all that. But the enemy, of course, utilized that opportunity to speak those words into my life. Nobody cares, but that was a lie. Those 2 words were nothing but lies. That, and again, that type of stuff will set you up. So in an abusive relationship, you think nobody cares. When I was going through the abuse, I thought nobody cared until I told my mother. And I found out my mom actually cared when she saw me needing her. That's when my mom came out and she put on her cape and decided, hey, now I'm going to fight for my daughter. You're not going to kill my daughter. And she came over and she got in my ex's face and she's just like, you ain't going to hurt my daughter, what have you. And she was just, going all out of her way. And she was a large part of the reason that I went ahead and got out that marriage, because I didn't want to see my mom stressing about me and worried about me or what have you. So another thing that, another belief system that is common in those relationships is no relationship is perfect. This is something that the abuser oftentimes says to the abused. And this is something that the abused person actually comes to believe no relationship is perfect. And of course we know that no relationship is perfect, but at the same time, it is not a healthy or a normal thing to have abuse in a relationship. Nobody should raise their hand. The woman shouldn't hit the man and the man shouldn't hit the woman. You got to learn healthy communication. This is the reason why I encourage a lot of you not to be trying to get into a relationship right now because of dysfunction in your family. You've never been on a functional foundation. So you want God to put you on a functional foundation so that you can learn what is normal and it becomes a new system in your life before you get into a relationship. That way, if you start courting somebody and they start manifesting dysfunctional or dangerous behavior, you'll know to get out of the relationship. But oftentimes they say no relationship is perfect. When I'm talking to abusers or abuse victims, abusers are oftentimes saying it's common for them to say, well, ain't nobody perfect. No relationship is perfect. And you said yourself you went through a divorce, so obviously no relationship is perfect. And it's like, you don't get it. It's not about being perfect, because of course you got 2 imperfect people. You're not going to have a perfect relationship, but there's a such thing as dangerous and unhealthy and toxic as well. And what you're exhibiting is dangerous, unhealthy, toxic behavior that's not only going to lead to the demise of the relationship, but is going to lead to the demise of your wife's life. It's going to lead to your children growing up without having a mother and daddy being in prison. And so they think that nobody is perfect. And of course we know that no relationship is perfect, but at the same time, even though no relationship is perfect, you should not be in a relationship where you're being abused. You should not be in a relationship where you're being hurt, choked, kicked, scratched, or even emotionally abused. We talk about men. Oftentimes you see abuse from men to women. Women oftentimes emotionally abuse men. And we talk about that. Women oftentimes emotionally abuse men. We are good with our words. We are sharp with our words. I learned as a woman, when I was married and I was broken and I was undelivered, I learned that tongue is a sharp thing, because it's crazy. In the middle of any moment of anger, the enemy will give you, just like God said, if you open your mouth, he'll feel it. The enemy does the same thing. When you're broken, he'll put some stuff in your mouth stuff in your heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, and you end up saying some stuff to your husband that goes way beyond the relationship, goes way beyond that argument. Stuff that years later he still hasn't recovered from. Years later he still brings up that conversation. Years later, as women, this is the reason we have to submit. One of the things I've learned, that as a woman, you have to be very, very mindful of your tongue, because we really know how to cut. We know how to cut somebody in a low place. And it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of healing to get to the spot where, even though I could say this to you, I'm not going to do it, because I love and respect you. Even in the moment of anger, I still love you and respect you. And I value our relationship to the point where I'm just going to, sit there and be quiet. But if you have no discipline, no self-control, you will open your mouth and say something that's going to be very damaging to your spouse, to your relationship, and then you'll turn around and be wondering why the relationship hasn't recovered years later. And you be sitting there talking about, he still hasn't forgiven me. I mean, I forgave him. Okay, yeah. So I was mad when I told him that Lil Kiki might not be his daughter, but I ain't cheat on him. But the thing is, you can't take that back. And so that planted a seed in his mind. And so as women, we have a tendency, we'll talk about a man sexually. We'll talk about, you ain't no good provider anyway. You can't fix nothing. You can't do this. We have a way of tearing people down. So as a woman, yes, we can be abusive. We're not oftentimes physically abusive, even though some women are. But a lot of times we are called nag. A nag is a woman who's just emotionally abusive. She's verbally abusive. She uses her tongue to tear down her marriage. The Bible says she tears down her marriage with her hands. She sits there and she lashes against her marriage with her tongue. And one of the things I often tell people is that marriage is a unit. It is a body. And one of the things you have to understand is every time you attack your spouse, you're attacking that marriage. You're attacking it, you're attacking it, attacking it. Now, we can survive nicks. We can survive little scratches and bruises. We survive, but it's just one body. But eventually, you or your spouse will deliver a fatal wound to your marriage, and it'll bleed out. You get to the point where you're just like, you haven't touched me. What's going on? It's been like months. What's going on with you? And he's like, I'm just not into this. I can't do this anymore. And that's because you were abused as a child, or you weren't disciplined. And so now you carry that over into your relationship. So again, make sure you get on a functional foundation so that you can have a healthy relationship, and you'll know what a healthy, functional, non-toxic relationship will be. Another belief that is common in a abusive relationship, number 8, last one: if I leave, he'll become the man I know he has the potential to become, and I'll lose out. I know somebody just screamed out right then and there, and going through deliverance right now. If I leave, he'll become the man I know he has the potential to be, and I'll become, and I'll lose out. Do you know this is one of the most common beliefs in a toxic relationship? Because everybody has potential. Everybody has potential. And so what happens is, when you're in an abusive relationship, you're going to see the guy's potential. As a matter of fact, that's one of the lures that the enemy uses to keep you in there, is that you're sitting here and you're talking to this guy, and he happens to be a genius. He's really smart. He's smart. He's romantic. He's a lot of great things. Like, this man has 105 great qualities, but he got 2 really bad qualities. And so people often tell you to do the list. You don't do the list. The list is a lie, because you can have a man who has 105 great qualities, but he has 2 sabotaging qualities that destroy that whole list, that makes him a danger to be around. So oftentimes what happens with abuse victims, and I was one. I had friends who were abuse victims, and the thing is, abuse victims often believe that, they see the man's potential, and he knows that he's holding him up by his potential. He knows that you're in love with this image that he's painted, this idea that he's giving you. He knows that you're in love. And so what he does is he uses his potential to keep the woman in. And the woman, she starts thinking, okay, I'm gonna get out this marriage, I'm gonna get out this marriage, I'm gonna get out this marriage, I'm gonna get out this relationship, this is dangerous, what have you. And then he comes back and he says, they're talking about giving me a promotion on my job. So for her, she fears that I'm gonna walk out too soon. I'm gonna walk out, he gonna get the promotion, and we won't have those money problems. He won't be stressed out, and he won't be angry anymore. And then I'm going to leave all the work and all the hard work, years, blood, sweat, and tears that I put into this relationship. I'm going to throw all of it away, and somebody else going to come along and benefit from it. He going to get with somebody else, and he's going to be this amazing man to her. And I could have had him for myself. I could have had him if I had just waited, if I had just held out. I could have had. That is the lie from the pit of hell. The thing about it is, he never reaches his potential. I can tell you how the story ends. He never reaches his potential. He continues to be abusive until he kills somebody or something bad happens to him. He goes, and the woman who finally gets out, who realizes that, I can't keep waiting on him to become the man that I know he has the ability, the potential to be. I have to walk away. Eventually, she is always, in 100% of the cases, hear me when I say this, 100% of the cases, she's going to hear about him abusing the next female. The next woman that comes into his life is going to get it worse than she did. The next woman that comes into his life. So for those of you out here who you're in an abusive relationship and you're holding on to the thread of holding on to the relationship by the thread of his potential, I hate to tell you that string is going to snap at some point. Every person, and you guys have heard me say this before, if I sit down and talk with a crackhead, I will find his potential. Every person has potential. You can sit down and you can talk. Okay, let me go ahead. But you can sit down and you can talk all day long with a person or what have you, and you will always find their potential. People can sit down and I can go, like I got cousins in my family. I was always close to the males in my family when I was younger. When I was a teenager, when I was a young woman or what have you, I didn't hang out with the females as much as I did with the guys. And I had a few of my female cousins that I was close to, but I was really close to my male cousins. And the reason for that is because the males were real. You know, they weren't bound by gossip. You know, gossip oftentimes is a female thing, and the guys weren't bound by gossip, and they just tell you, they just keep it real with you, what have you. And I like that. And so that was more my personality, just be straight up or what have you. And so I remember sitting and talking to my cousins and realizing how smart they were. Just talking to them and just talking to them and listening to them, I realized how smart they were. And I would always see their potential or what have you. And it was disheartening as a young woman to watch them not reach their potential, to watch them go out and make a lot of crazy decisions and end up, being nothing more than a baby daddy living in the hood, driving around with spinning rims on their car breaking down on the side of the road, talking about their rims got stolen or what have you, taking pictures with the red cup in their hand and the alcohol, eyes bloodshot red. You know, it was disheartening to see somebody who had so much potential, somebody who was so smart, to not reach their potential. It took me years, and guys, hear me when I say this, it took me years, and I think a lot of you have to get to this point. It took me years to realize that everybody has potential. Not everybody reaches their potential. You know, the thing is, you can sit there and talk to everybody, and you will hear their gifts speaking out. You will hear, their potential. But if you hold on to somebody because of their potential, you're going to lose out. If you get with somebody and you hold on to somebody because of their potential, you're going to lose out. If you bring a man into your house and you're taking care of him, he's sleeping on your couch, and you sitting there tolerating him because of his potential, you're going to lose out. Because the only thing he's going to do is show you his potential to be just as, his potential to be a user, or what have you, to be a person who takes advantage. He's going to show you the bad side of his potential. So the thing is, you want to understand that even if you leave, 9 times out of 10, he won't reach his potential. Even if he does, that's a great thing. That's what you want to do. If I leave a guy and he goes and reaches his potential, then the thought that I have is maybe I was holding him back. That doesn't make me go into a corner, curl up, and take a knife and run it across my wrist. What it does, it will tell me that I need to better myself as a human being. It will tell me to go back and review my own choices, my own methods, my own belief systems, and revise them. It would tell me to, have some of my friends and people around me to tell me, Tiffany, I would ask them, hey, what do you think about me as a person? Maybe even to ask him, if I came in contact with him, hey, what do you think I done wrong? Like, can you tell me some of the things I need to work on? Tell me some of the stuff I need to work on. So let's go ahead and move on. Most abuse victims have, one, made an idol of their victimizers. I hate to say this, and I'm probably going to get some flack behind this. I believe that more than 90% of abuse victims have made a god of their predators. Their predators have become their everything. And this is the thing about a predator. Is a predator oftentimes will tear you down while building themselves up because they want you to idolize them. They want to become the most important person, the most powerful person in your life. As a matter of fact, they want you to believe that don't nobody else out there care. And this is the reason why the enemy will haunt you with words that nobody cares. They want you to believe that you are better off with them, that, Listen, I'm a gift. I'm God's gift to women. I can go out here and be with whoever I want to. You lucked up and got me. I could have been with Sherry. I could have been with Melissa. I could have been with such and such or what have you. And so what they do is they'll oftentimes find a woman who already has low self-esteem, a woman who has low self-worth. One of the evidences that a woman has low self-esteem, low self-worth, she doesn't know her values when she's willing to fornicate with you. See, some people gonna get delivered and some people gonna get mad. When a woman is willing to fornicate, it shows that she doesn't believe that she's worthy of being called a wife, or she believes that some women out there are better suited than her, so she has to get an edge up. She has to do something extra to reel the man in or what have you. And so most abuse victims, again, have made an idol of their victimizers. And the victimizers, I've seen cases like this. I've sat in houses with people and I've listened to the abuser talk to the female or what have you. And I remember an old friend of mine. And, I remember her, and she shared her story many times, so I'm not sharing it, But I remember an old friend of mine, her and her ex came and sat in my house, and he would cast himself as a Casanova, talking about how all the women wanted him when he was younger. Well, not when he was younger, because they were still young at the time. But he would cast himself, like the stories he would tell was like he was, gangster, and when nobody messed with him, like he would make it look like everybody was afraid of him and all the women wanted him. But my ex used to know him when he was younger, so my ex used to call him out right then, and they was like, "Man, come on, man." He said, "I remember that time I had to rescue you or what have you." But this was the thing that he was selling her. He was selling her so many lies. So when they got to the point where they broke up, she started recounting all the lies, and it was just lies. It was just different things. And so what he did was he built himself up as an idol. When I'm talking to a person who is in an abusive relationship, when I'm talking to the abuse victim, it's really hard to reach that person. It's actually easier to reach the abuser than it is to reach the abuse victim, because the abuse victim is bound by a series of beliefs, and she believes, again, she separates the monster from the man, and she believes that if you cast the monster out the man, like she thinks it's a magical spell. You take him to church. I'm gonna take him to church. Your church does deliverance. Oh, girl, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I'm gonna bring him to church Sunday. Girl, pray for me. I'm gonna bring him to church Sunday. She thinks if I can only get him to that altar. If I can only get him to the altar, they going to put their hand on his head. He going to start shaking violently. He going to fall out on the floor, and the monster going to be gone, and we're going to live happily ever after. And it doesn't work that way. The Bible says, "Can two walk together except they be agreed?" It still reigns true when it comes to demonic spirits. People don't go through deliverance because they went to an altar. They go through deliverance because they fall out of agreement with a demon. They go through deliverance because a man who is an abuser or a woman who is an abuser, they go through deliverance because they don't want to be that way. Because they realize it's a problem, because they confess that that's a problem. They say, "I need help. I want to get rid of this. I don't want to be like this." That's why they go through deliverance. So again, most abuse victims have made an idol of their victimizers. They'll fornicate with them. They'll do everything. They'll do whatever it takes. They'll sin against God. They'll stop going to church because of them. They'll start doing everything to hold on to that man. But they're always led by the belief that things are going to get better. I'm just doing this for a little while. I'm stopping going to church for a little while. I'm stopping hanging around my friend for a little while. I'm stopping it. Everything is for a little while in their mind. But the victim, the predator, is just really exercising his control over her. He's just trying to see how far he can go. Let's go ahead and move on, guys. Number two, made a victim of their victimizers. Most abuse victims have made a victim of their victimizers. So when you're an abuse victim, a lot of times you look at the victimizer as a victim. His mama hit him. His mama did him wrong. His daddy raped him. This happened to him. As a matter of fact, even with the R. Kelly thing, we see people coming out talking about the things that have happened to him that justify, and this is their attempt to justify him being the way that he is. And what you hear is people crying out who are abuse victims. A lot of times a victim comes to sympathize with a victim comes to sympathize with the victimizer. And there is a syndrome for that. I don't remember the name of that syndrome, but there's a syndrome for that where I think it's Stockholm Stockholm syndrome, but there's a syndrome where the woman, she starts to sympathize with her, and she'll even defend the person who has victimized her. Let's go ahead and move on. Number 3, most abuse victims have invested too much of themselves into their relationships and too soon. When you're dealing with a predator wants to get you to invest, because if I'm sitting back, and I want you to think about it from a monetary standpoint. If all I have in my account, if I invest everything I have into, let's say some guy walk up to me and he says, I'm a rapper, my career about to, pick up and all this other stuff. And he sells me this belief that he's about to blow up. And I really believe him, and I give him everything that I have. I'm going to invest all my time and my energy into making sure that he makes it. I'm going to invest all my time and all of my energy into making sure that he does not waste my money. And this is what an abuser does, is an abuser gets you to invest all that you are. Here's the thing. None of us know who we really are and all that we have locked up on the inside of us until we follow Jesus Christ for a long time. So what you have is, when you're dealing with a predator likes to catch you when you're in times of low self-esteem, when all you have is your body, when all you have is a few hundred in your account, when all you have, even if you don't have that, when all you have is that little car outside, when all you have is that little job that's paying you $10 an hour or what have you, that's all you have. And they like to catch you in times like that, so they can get you to invest everything. You done gave your body, you done gave your time, you done gave up your best friend, you done walked out of your church, you done gave up everything to be with them. And so they get you to make that large investment, and once you made that large investment, because of the investment, you can't walk away. When people come to you, this is why when I'm talking to a woman who's in an abusive relationship and I'm dealing with the abuser, I spend more time talking to the abuser than I do to the abuse victim, because I'm trying to get the abuser to let her go free, but even mentally, just to release her, because for her, she has invested everything. So when you're talking to her, she's going to, and again, it's not just gender specific for the guys who, you can take it and replace it with him. But when you're talking to her, one of the things that she's doing is she's it's a wall up, because she don't really want to hear much of what you're saying. All she wants to hear is how to fix the relationship. How do we get the monster out of him? How do we change him, or what have you? So again, they've invested too much into their relationships, but the predator has not necessarily invested that much, so it's easier to reach the predator than it is to reach the victim. Number 4, most abuse victims have separated themselves from many of the people who genuinely love them. This is one of their sacrifices. The Bible talks about present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Well, when you're dealing with a abuser or predator versus a victim, the victim oftentimes will sacrifice not only their bodies, they'll get their bodies, but they'll sacrifice their family members. They'll sacrifice everything and anything to make the relationship work. Oftentimes they sacrifice what's most valuable to them. And I found this is something I've seen with women. Oftentimes I've had this happen to me when I've had friends who would say, oh, the best friend, oh, you're my best friend, you're this and you're that. And then they get into a relationship and a guy, he starts trying to see how far he can go with them. And because they lack self-esteem, because they didn't know their self-worth, what they'll do is, he starts complaining about Tiffany, or they'll come and say, oh, Tiffany does this, or Tiffany said that. And what they're doing is laying me on the altar. What they're doing is they have to take something very valuable to them. We've been friends for 5 years. I talk to her every day. We hanging out all the time, or what have you. She's done this for me. She's done this for my children. Let me prove to you that I really want to be with you. Let me prove to you how serious I am. Because when you're dealing with a predator will oftentimes give you something that has great monetary value, because to you've never had somebody to give you something. So, for example, you don't spend money on yourself too much. You don't do much of anything for yourself. A predator oftentimes will go out and buy you a nice little Michael Kors bag, go get your hair done, take you out, let you drive his car. He'll do a lot of different things to build value with you. Now, you're sitting here, when you lack self-esteem, when you have low self-esteem, your first thought is, how can I repay him? This is a default way of thinking for the broken. How can I repay him? I've had sex with him, but that's still, at the same time, we can say he had sex with me. It's not like he the only one to enjoy it. I enjoyed him. What can I give him? And so a lot of times what they do, they say, well, Tiffany, he didn't complain about her a couple of times. So they sacrifice the friendship on the altar. They put the friendship on the altar. Yeah, I stopped talking to Tiffany because this, and he says, oh, okay, wow, okay. And so what he's doing is he's separating and isolating them. And in 100% of the cases, I've had those women that I've seen that, or friends I've had that to happen with, to reach back out to me probably months or years later to tell me about the abuse that they endured at the hands of the guys. But what those guys had done was successfully get them to sacrifice all of their relationships. And this is the reason why a lot of times when I'm talking to women, I can recognize, okay, you made an idol out of marriage, so 9 times out of 10 you about to go into an abusive relationship. And I already know it's just a matter of time before I'm up for the sacrifice, before you come pull me up and you didn't put the turtle dove on the altar, and you didn't put all these things, and now you feel like I got to put something big on the altar. I got to give him something major because he's been talking about marrying me, and he said to me that he want me to have his baby, and so now I feel like I got to do something for him. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Most predatory spouses or partners have, number one, made an idol of themselves or their victims. And this is the predator. They made an idol of themselves. They are prideful. They see the person in the mirror and they think that person deserves everything at your expense and everybody else, the world's expense. Everybody's supposed to just let them have what they want. Or they see them victims as idols. And the crazy thing is, even though they idolize their victim, they still beat them. Because what they're doing is they're beating their version of their God. You are their everything, and that's a dangerous thing. You become their absolute everything, and for that very reason, they feel like if I lose you, I lose everything that I have. They feel like if I lose you, I lose everything that I have. And so people who think like that, they're really dangerous. Those are the ones who usually end up killing their wives or killing their husbands. Number 2. Most predatory spouses cast themselves as victims. And the crazy part is they actually believe that they're victims. They genuinely, and in some cases, sometimes it's just manipulation. Sometimes they really believe that they're victims or what have you. So what they'll do is they'll beat their wives and stuff like that. Then they'll come back. They may come back and say, I'm sorry. And then they'll turn around and talk about something that happened to them in the workplace yesterday. I know I hit you yesterday, and I'm sorry. I'm going to get some help. It's just been a really hard week for me. The guy I told you on my job, Barry, he's trying to get me fired. He's trying to get me fired. And so what you have is the abuser is starting to cast himself as the victim. He's finding some type of way to cast himself as the victim. This is very common with narcissistic personalities. They always manage to find a way to cast themselves as the victims. Number 3. Most predatory spouses have separated their victims from everyone who loves them, especially the people who can physically or emotionally help them. When I was younger, even though I was out there in the world, what have you, and I was out there and doing crazy stuff, when I didn't have confidence, I had pride. I had a whole lot of pride. And a lot of times, if I had a friend who was getting into a relationship with a really bad guy, he did not want her with me because I had so much, my self-esteem was through the roof. I was conceited. I had my self-esteem was through the roof. Like, I believed that I could have whatever I wanted, whoever I wanted. I believed I can do whatever I wanted. I believed that the finest man in the room belonged to me. That was just the way I thought. And so because my confidence was so high, oftentimes when a guy came along, that I was the first person that she had to put on the altar. I was the first person, like, you got to get rid of her or what have you, because that girl's confidence is absolutely through the roof. So they'll separate you from everybody who loves you, and especially the people who can physically help you, like your cousin who can beat them down or what have you, and anybody who can emotionally help you. Somebody who can come in, and somebody who maybe going to college, or smart friends, or your friends. They want to surround you with people who have low self-worth, people who have low self-esteem. They don't want you around people who can really help you. Number 4, most predatory spouses or partners have surrounded themselves with people who are like them, worse off than them, or isolated themselves. Again, most predatory spouses have surrounded themselves with people who are like them, They surround themselves with other abusers. Somebody's abusing drugs. Somebody's abusing something. They surround themselves with people who are like them, worse off than them. They love people who are worse off than them. One of the things I've seen that abusive men and women do is, I've seen abusive men say, yeah, I mean, I slapped her and it wasn't right, but my boy, he choked this girl out till she passed out. She passed out. Then he turned around and hit her in the head with a rock. And so what they're doing is trying to say, hey, look, I'm not all that bad of a person, or what have you. And they love to take their women around their broken friends or broken family members, so the women can look at the broken, and then they can go up and then they can cast themselves as the hero. Man, I'm just saying, you don't hit the girl in the head with a rock. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I understand what she did was crazy and stuff like that. Like I was telling my baby yesterday, that kind of stuff. Me and her, we fight sometimes, we argue, but I love her, but I ain't gonna hit her in the head with a rock. What he's doing is he's making himself seem normal to her. He's making himself actually seem like a hero to her. He's making himself seem like a good guy to her. All the while, he's highlighting the fact that this dude is actually crazier than him. And this is very common with abusers. So again, they surround themselves with people who are like them, worse off than them, and oftentimes they will isolate themselves. They don't want to have anything to do with anybody. They want to isolate themselves and their spouses. Most predatory spouses or partners are narcissistic. So with that being said, we're going to move real quick, guys, because I want to get into the sexual abuse part, or we probably do that on part 2. But most predatory spouses or partners are narcissistic. They are narcissistic. What does that mean? Narcissistic is so self-involved, self-absorbed that they lack empathy for others. Everything is about themselves. Now, narcissistic people have a small measure of empathy, but there are other personality types, other broken personality types that I think the psychopath, they say, is the one who lacks empathy. The psychopath and the narcissist have very similar traits, but the psychopath lacks empathy. The narcissist has a small measure of sympathy, but for the most part, they're going to always cast themselves as a victim. And so spiritually speaking, most narcissistic personalities are the Jezebel spirit. See, that the narcissism is just the corporate word or the secular word for Jezebel. In the church, we say Jezebel spirit, but in the world, they say the narcissist. And of course, in the church, we picked up that term as well. But most of the time, when you're dealing with, I would venture out to say 98, 99% of the time when you're dealing with the narcissist, you're dealing with the Jezebel spirit. You're dealing with the Jezebel spirit. It's a spirit of self. It's all about self, me, I. It's all about witchcraft and control. You got to understand that witchcraft and control is all about getting what I want. It's all about getting, the person saying me, me, me. I think that my thoughts are better. My plans are better. Everything that I'm doing is right, and what you're doing is wrong. And even when I'm wrong, I'm going to try to make it right. So you just got to let me. And so that's the narcissistic personality. So signs of the predator. We're going to move through this real quick. Number 1, trying to move too quickly in a relationship. Beware of anybody who says I love you too quick. Anybody who seems to be rushing a relationship, they're in a rush for a reason. They want to hurry up and build a soul tie. They want to hurry up and build value with you. They want to hurry up and get you to invest all that you are. And they can be some of the most charming people. I'm in love with you. I had a dream last night of our daughter. They rarely say our son, they say our daughter. I had a dream like she looked just like you, and I mean, in my dream I was holding her and what have you. But they're trying to move really quickly in a relationship. They want to hurry up and put a ring on your finger. They want to hurry up. Oftentimes, and I was out there in the world, guys, but oftentimes they always talk about getting you pregnant quick. I know this a little soon, and I know you and I, we're not, we hadn't done anything or something like that, but girl, you probably don't want to let me touch you because I'm put a baby all up in you. Because I'm telling you, I want a piece of you. I'm in love with you. I'm this. They always want, and a lot of babies who are walking around are the children of narcissistic personalities. They are the products of a man attempting to control a woman, or a woman attempting to hold on to a man. So they try to move too quickly in a relationship. They're overly jealous. This is always cute at first. They're very jealous. They're jealous of your friends, why you keep hanging around her all the time, why she keep calling, who is that guy, your co-workers. You get to the point where you become afraid to even look. And of course, this isn't all predators, because some predators they like their woman getting attention. Some predators will be like, baby, put on that short skirt. I like the way your butt look in that short skirt. Put on, why you, yeah. They like you to be, voluptuous and breast out and butt hanging out and all that other stuff. But then you have the other ones that are very, very, very jealous. And so for them, they don't like any males talking to you. They don't like any woman having any type of influence over you. They don't like any of that. If you have any type of influence, they will challenge you. If you happen to be the friend, they will try to show themselves as smarter than you. They'll kind of barge in conversations and try to, cast themselves, as more intelligent than you. If that does not work, then they'll pull the person away from you. Number 3, they're easily angered. Easily angered. This is why you give yourself time to get to know a person. You don't rush into a relationship. Number 4, some of them are highly angered. You ever been around somebody and it's like, no matter what crazy stuff happened, and it's usually the beginning of the relationship, it's just like, that should have ticked you off. And they're just like, it's okay. Sorry. Want to go get something to eat? You dealing with a crazy dude. Dude is internalizing everything. And he gonna get you. He's gonna get you. That's the crazier one of them both. The one who's easily angered has trouble hiding his demons. The one who hardly angered has his demons on speed dial. So he knows how to calmly sit there. It's okay. Let's go get something to eat. You need somebody to get your hair done? See, he's doing that because he hasn't reeled you in yet. He hasn't gotten you to invest your whole self into the relationship yet. So he's just waiting it out. He's just waiting it out. But as soon as you invest, that's the one who will sit there and, you can be arguing with him. He's just like, that thing, he done punched you out. And you wake up trying to figure out, you know what? He's too calm, too nice to have hit me. I had to have walked into a dresser. You like, what happened? He's just like, I don't know, you just passed out. How I get this knot on my head? And that's the crazier one of them all. Signs of a predator include most predators are self-centered. They're narcissistic. They talk a lot about themselves. They think a lot about themselves. Everything revolves around them. They will let you talk about yourself. If you happen to be centered or what have you, they'll let you talk about yourself in the beginning. They'll let you do a lot of things in regards to yourself. All the while, they're internalizing this belief that you are a self-centered brat, even though they too are self-centered. And so they'll allow you to get so far into the relationship before they start trying to break you. Stop worshiping yourself and worship me. And those are words they don't say, but that's what they're really breaking it down to. Stop worshiping yourself and start worshiping me. Most predators always cast themselves as victims. We talked about that. They have countless stories of men and women who've left them. They have countless stories. I was with Michelle, and I love that girl. And she walked out of my life, cheated on me with my best friend. Then there was Daisy, and Daisy went out there and I found out that she was sleeping with my kindergarten teacher. Then there was Toya. Toya hurt me the most. Yeah, Toya hurt me the most. Toya walked out of my life, on the day I was planning on proposing to her. He don't tell you that he only knew Toya for 2 months and that they didn't really build that much of a relationship, but that Toya found out he was crazy. One of the craziest guys that I ever dated, again, guys, I lived a crazy life, but one of the craziest guys that I had ever dated, I dated him for 2 weeks. But when he explained, or he told his ex about me, he made it look like I had dated him for like 2-3 years. Because this is what they do. They always cast themselves as a victim. And I've told this story before. I'll just tell it real quick. I was working at Walmart, and I remember I was passing through the layaway department. I had this friend who worked in layaway, and I said hey to her. I was like, hey. She said, hey, Tiffany. And I was going into the bathroom because I had to pee. So I went into the bathroom, and I remember as I was opening the door to go into the bathroom, this girl, she looked at my friend, she looked at me, and she followed me into the bathroom. I didn't think too much of it then. It wasn't until I got in the bathroom, closed the stall, and I heard She was knocking. It's me, Milo. But she was knocking on the stall, on my stall, and she was like, and I was like, yes. Now I'm in the stall, using the bathroom. She's like, your name Tiffany? I was like, yeah. She was like, oh, okay. She said, I'll wait till you get it. I'll wait till you get finished. And I thought that was the craziest thing. I was like, the heck is that? So once I came out of there, of course, I come out and she's standing there at the stall, like almost just really close to me. And I go up to start washing my hands, and she was like, she said, you Tiffany? And then she said, did you used to date? She said his name. I was like, yeah. And she was like, why y'all break up? I said, because he tried to fight me. It's the time I was going to the club and stuff. I said, he tried to fight me in the club. And I what happened there? I'm not going to be nobody's, I'm not about to get abused or what have you. Not knowing that years later I was going to be in an abusive marriage. That spirit was coming after me. But I was like, I'm not about to be in an abusive relationship or what have you. And she was like, well, he ain't going to try that with me. She said, I'm his girlfriend now. I was like, oh, okay. She said, but I just had to meet you because he keeps talking about you. And he always tells me that I remind him of you. Every time he's always talking about you. I'm like, I dated dude for 2 weeks. I ain't never kissed a dude. I ain't never did nothing with a dude. Like nothing. Absolutely nothing. We talked on the phone. That's it. I went out to eat with him a couple of times. That's it. That's the extent of our relationship. But the thing about it was, because he saw me as having been probably the best woman he had or what have you, he felt like he needed to put me up on this thing and what have you. But he had to cast himself as the victim. So what ended up happening with this girl, he had got her infatuated with me. He had told her all these lies and made her think that we had such a beautiful relationship. I was like, and I told her, I was like, no, I only dated him for like 2 weeks. And nothing happened between. She's like, y'all know. I said, no, nothing ever happened between us. Ever. We never kissed. We never did nothing. I said, I told her, I said, he tried to fight me one time. After he saw me dancing with somebody else, and I ended the relationship, and he stalked me for a bit, but I ignored him. But so long story short, he cast the relationship as having been some type of beautiful melody that, what have you, and she fell for it. And so a few years later, when I was in a relationship with my ex-husband, we weren't married, but we were living together. I remember my cousin had came in from out of town. And forgive me, guys, I see I tell a lot of stories, but this is just my life. But my cousin was in from out of town, and no, what it was, my ex and I, we were outside. My cousin was in from out of town, but at that particular time, I think she was in the house. But me and my ex were outside. We were doing some yard work, and I happened to see this other ex, the crazy one. I saw him passing down the street. Now, he hadn't seen me in a few years or what have you, and hadn't talked to me in a few years, but I knew he was crazy. And I saw him, and I was like, ooh, I hope he didn't see me. And I told my ex, I only dated him for 2 weeks. I said, but I hope he didn't see me, because if he saw me, he gonna come here. And I told my ex about it or what have you, because I just saw him pass. But he didn't turn his head. I just saw him pass down the street. And my ex was like, he better not come over here. And my cousin, I think it was that night or a couple of nights later, my cousin and I, we were up. It was 1 in the morning. My ex had went to bed. We were up. I remember I was sleeping, and we were talking. And I get a knock on the door. I'm like, who's knocking on my door at 1 in the morning? And I was like, who is it? And it was some female name I didn't know. And she kept saying her name. So finally I opened the door because I was feeling gangster. Like, who's knocking on my door at 1 in the morning? I opened the door. I was like, and it was the girl who followed me to the bathroom. And she asked for some name. I was like, she doesn't live here. When I looked, he was in the car. He had brought her to the house and had brought her up. And he was sitting in the car just staring at me, and she was asking for some female, and I was like, wrong house. She said, she doesn't live here. I said, no, ma'am. But he had obviously seen me and brought her back to my house or what have you. So don't know why I told you guys that story, but anyhow, they always cast themselves as the victim. They have countless stories of men and women who've left them. They got countless stories of men and women who left them. Number 7, they introduce you to their family prematurely. Beware of anybody who says, I know it's been 2 weeks, but I would love for you to meet my mama. You ain't the first person that has met his mama. This dude has a habit of falling in love. And the crazy thing is, you come across people like that, they always say the same thing. Mom, I think this the one. Because they crazy. They think because they live so much in their fantasies. They live so much in their hearts and in their minds or what have you. So they happen to be a little bit on the crazy side, so they always think that, they always think that I met the one or what have you. So beware of anybody who wants you to meet their closest friends or their family prematurely. You want somebody who's going to take their time and get to know you, to know if I want to really genuinely build something with you, not based on how you look. Don't get caught up in, I want to introduce you because you're pretty. Then you're just a trophy. Then they're just introducing you because you like girl number 72 that they've introduced to the family. They're just trying to establish in the family that I be getting them pretty girls, man. Don't I get the fine ones or what have you? So anybody who tries to introduce you to their family prematurely is likely crazy. Number 8, they like to buy their victims expensive gifts. Understand that expensive is subjective to every person. If a guy's not making that much money, an expensive gift to him may be a Hallmark card. Somebody who's not making that much money, an expensive gift to him may be a trip to Red Lobster. He's never paid $30 for a meal. He's always took every woman he's dated out to Burger King or what have you, and they sat in a couple of times, and they even put the napkin on their lap and they stuffed the napkin here and tried to have something, but then he turned around and he got a little bit of money in, and he decided that I'm going to spend $30 today instead of spending 10, and he takes the person to Red Lobster. So again, that is subjective, but they oftentimes will buy expensive gifts. They'll make a sacrifice. And I tell women all the time, if you know you're not interested in a guy, don't take. And an older woman told me this a long time ago. This is why the Bible says the older women have to come out and need to come out and teach the younger women. That is important. An older woman told me this when I was a teenager. She said, if you know you're not interested in a man, don't take something from him. Don't take anything from him. And I see women doing that nowadays, and I'm just like, you don't even know what type of danger you're putting yourself in. I just need a ride to work, girl. So he let me use his car. Don't do that. Don't do that, because at some point when you try to tell him that, hey, nah, I'm not into you like that or what have you. Now, I didn't told him we're not in a relationship. When you crunk his car up, you told him that you were in a relationship. That's why he gave you the keys to his car. He ain't holding himself back from being in another relationship to be your friend. And so you putting yourself in a dangerous position. So they buy their victims expensive gifts. They'll oftentimes give you what's valuable to them. Of course, a good guy can do that as well, but you just have to measure the behavior. And you have to see, what's coming with that gift. Every expensive gift has a price tag attached to it, and not the price tag that you see inside the store. The price tag oftentimes is control. So one of the things I used to do when I was younger, I learned to do is, if somebody gave me a gift, if they mentioned that gift, I gave it back. Like if we got into an argument and they mentioned that gift, I always gave it back, or I gave the monetary value of that gift back. If you sat back and said, I took you out to Red Lobster and everything, I spent $30 on you, my first order of business was to get your $30 and give it right back to you. I don't care if you wanted it or not, was to give you your $30 back. But they will buy their victims expensive gifts. Number 9, they always try to control the conversations. They always like to control the direction of the conversation. This is not just with abusive men, abusive women. A lot of times when I'm dealing with a female who has a Jezebel personality, or she has the Jezebelic trait, meaning it's in her family, I notice that she'll try to control the conversation, and I stop them. As soon as they start, I stop them, because what they're doing is they'll talk about what they want to talk about. They'll tell you all the news they got to tell you. They'll ask all the questions they want to ask. And as soon as you start trying, they'll say, oh, girl, I'll call you back. They'll try to find some way to get off the conversation. And so when they do that type of behavior, I'll stop them and I'll let them know that, hey, listen, you can't control the conversation. When you call, we're going to have a two-sided conversation. That means you're going to listen too. And a lot of times, I'm sorry, and it's a Jezebelic trait. I understand this in your family, but I'm just helping you to understand that you want to break that. You want to make sure that when you call people that you're listening. You don't want to always call to just talk about me, I, or what have you. But when you're dealing with a predator, remember, most predators are narcissistic, and the narcissistic personality is the Jezebel. But they're always trying to control the direction of the conversation. If you get into an argument with them, they'll throw something out there to cast themselves at the victim. They'll hinge onto some word that you say. Now, you dealing with that personality, for example, you didn't call him on the phone with his ex-girlfriend, or you found a text message on his phone where he's telling his ex-girlfriend that he's still in love with her. Now, when you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, they don't like being backed into a corner, or you're dealing with Jezebel. They don't like being backed into a corner. They don't like feeling like they're losing control. They like to be in control of everything. So the order of the purpose of the conversation or everything they do from that point on is to regain control over you, regain control over the conversation. So the conversation changes to, why you checking my phone? You gave me your phone to call your mama. Remember, the text message happened to come through and I saw it on the screen. Why you reading my messages? See, that's the kind of stuff I'll tell you. You know what? Now I gotta go because I'm not about to deal with this. And so they will cast themselves. All of a sudden, it goes from the stuff that he did to all of a sudden he's the victim, and you're running up behind him saying, no, I didn't check your messages. I'm saying it came across the screen of your phone and I saw it, and when it came across, no, but I'm trying to say, listen, I dealt with that with Sally. Sally was checking my phone like that. I ain't about to deal with that with you or nobody else. I'm sorry. I love you, but I'd rather be alone than to sit up there and go through that kind of stuff anymore. And all of a sudden you find yourself trying to win him back or what have you. They always try to control the conversations. They are very good at casting themselves as the victim. Number 10, they are very manipulative. Very manipulative, obviously. Number 11, they display anger towards a specific race or gender. They often show anger toward, and let's talk about the gender thing. A lot of times when you find a man who is a predator, a lot of times he has anger toward women. I found when I was in an abusive relationship, if you've been in it for a long time, you kind of catch on. So I found, even not just the abusive marriage, but I've dealt with guys who could have potentially been abusive, but I used to always break up with them when I found out that they were potentially abusive. But I found that you're Baby and you're Tiffany, as long as you're doing right. But as soon as you take them off, you become, y'all women. Now, see, what I'm saying? Women be doing this, or have you, and unless you know that they've been wounded by a woman. And so when you hurt them or you embarrass them or you offend them, the first thing that they do is they no longer see you as they begin to objectify you. They no longer see you by who you are as a person. You become an object. You become nothing but a woman. And so that's what they have, anger toward a specific race or gender. So how do you get away from a predator? Let me see how far we've gone into this, guys. How do you get away from a predator? Number 1, study the Word of God. That's what's going to help to build your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your knowledge. What got me delivered from bad relationships was me just studying the Word of God. Me studying the Word constantly. In an abusive marriage, I studied the Word of God. In a marriage where I knew I wasn't loved or what have you, I studied the Word of God. I kept studying the Word of God, and I kept studying the Word of God, and it started to build my confidence. Started building my confidence in Christ. It started building my self-worth. It helped me to understand that I wasn't just here by happenstance. It helped me to understand that God has a plan for me. It helped me to understand that I wasn't just the lower part of society, that I'm just going to get whatever gets tossed at me. All the rich people and all the people who look like this, all the people who look like that are the ones who are going to get all the great things in life. And I'll just have to take whatever's tossed my way, whatever falls from the master's table. I'll just have to get the crumbs off of the ground. It helped me to stop thinking like that. Because again, when I was in the world, my self-esteem was through the roof. I thought I could have, but then as I started to read the Word of God, as I started to kind of humble myself, when I started coming out of that thinking, when I started walking away from pride, then I realized that I was really masking low self-worth. It was just a mask or what have you. And so God had to really build me up. So I had to study the Word of God. Number 2, tell people what's happening. If you're in an abusive relationship, talk about it. The Bible says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Talk about it. I didn't start getting delivered. Crazy enough, I was with my ex for a total of 7 years. We were together, married for, living together for 6 years as a husband and wife. We lived together 2 years as boyfriend and girlfriend. But it wasn't until I actually opened my mouth and started talking about it that I really started going through deliverance. The crazy part was, I told my mom in the 2nd or 3rd year of the marriage, but it was probably 3rd or 4th year maybe. But once I told my mom, I slowly started coming out of that relationship. Once I told somebody who was valuable to me, I slowly started coming out of that relationship. That was the beginning of my deliverance, when I opened my mouth and I started talking about it. And I found that when people usually start talking about things, that's usually when they're starting to kind of come out of the relationship or what have you. And so you're looking for another perspective that does not necessarily support what you've been told or what you've come to believe. You want somebody to tell you what common sense is telling you. So talk about it. Tell people what's happening. Tell somebody, not a gossip. Ask God to send the right people, but talk about it. Call a abuse line or something like that. Talk about it. Talk to your pastor. Talk about what's happening to you, and let people begin to build you up. Number three, um, I'll just say this one for number three. Put it on record. Call the police. If you're in an abusive relationship, don't you ever go without putting it on record, because a lot of times when a person kills their spouse or the person in a relationship with, a lot of times when they kill them, it wasn't on record that they were abusing the person, which is the reason why they're able to walk free for so many years. So put it on record. Even if you don't file charges, you need to put it on record. Now, you do need to file charges. It's important, but a lot of times I understand abuse victims, oftentimes they're under the spirit of witchcraft and control, and they believe that if I call the police, he goes to jail, I have nowhere to go. And let me say this, a lot of times the reality is abuse victims, they don't necessarily know where to go. They come from dysfunctional families, so sometimes they have to choose between the greater of two evils. They have to choose between going back home to their mama, who happens to be living with their stepfather who sexually abused them, versus living with their abusive husband. And so they never got an education. They never did much of anything. So they have to choose between the greater of two evils. So in a case like that, I tell you, one of the things you have to do is you have to tap into your desperation. Your desperation will help you to reach your potential. What does that mean? That means you take yourself out of that situation and put yourself in a shelter. Put yourself in a shelter. Get to the point where you are absolutely desperate. Because in a shelter, you're going to be desperate to get out of there. Put yourself in a shelter. Get into a spot where you're desperate. Get into a spot where you're going to say, okay, I will never put myself in this situation again. My potential got pulled out when I got into a spot when I was desperate. When my ex said that I was going to lose my house, my car, and he said, I'm not paying for anything else. That's when I got desperate, and I said I would never, ever, ever in my life rely on a man to take care of me. I said, nope. I get into a relationship, hey, I'm going to be making my own money. I ain't going to be sitting up there broken, hoping that things work. And, I'm not going to ever be to the point where my livelihood is dependent upon our relationship working. He has that type of power, what have you. So make sure, again, put it on record. Number three, last one, obviously. Number four, obviously, leave. Okay, that's my phone. Leave. Understand that despite the predator's promises, it won't get better. This is something that it took me years to get to, something that it took me years to understand. And so I just want to tell you guys, if you're in a relationship like that, leave. Leave. It's not going to get any better. You're not going to ever get to the point where he's going to look at you one day and say, baby, when I put you in the figure 4 the other day, my life flashed before my eyes and I realized what I was doing to you is wrong. And so I'm going to reach my whole potential. I'm going to go out here and he may say, I'm going to do better and I'm not going to do it. But the reality is he's not. When you're dealing with somebody, and this is one of the things I tell women all the time, when you're dealing with somebody and you give them a measure of power, I want you to understand that people get drunk off of power. People always get drunk off of power. And so if you give a person power over you, you give a person control over you, they're going to start becoming addicted to that power. They're going to start becoming addicted to that control. And when you try to take that back, that's a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous thing, because now they feel like they own you as a person. And the crazy thing is they genuinely don't see anything wrong with the way that they think, that they're thinking. They don't see anything wrong with the way that they're thinking. And so when you try to pull yourself out of that relationship, or you try to start, just distancing yourself from a relationship, they start feeling like the victim. They start feeling like, I told you my secrets. I gave you my children. I'm out here working 2 and 3 jobs to take care of you. I'm out here doing all this. Yeah, I might. Okay, yeah. I threw the microwave at you. I choked you out. I did all this other stuff. But at the same time, I love you. You know what happened to me as a child. I remember counseling a couple, and every time I would confront the guy about his abusive ways, first thing he would retreat to is, you know what happened to me as a child. I told you what happened to me as a child. I told you. They would go always. They can never accept themselves being a predator. They always feel like I have to be the victim. They always feel like I need to be the victim. I need to maintain some level of control. So make sure that you put it on record. Make sure that you leave and understand that the promises, despite the predator's promises, it does not get better. It won't get better. The predator believes it will get better. Sometimes they genuinely believe that, but it doesn't happen because they're still thinking that there's some type of way that you can satisfy that void in them, and it's not true. You're not going to satisfy that void in them. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you say. You're not going to satisfy that void. It doesn't matter if you start cooking. And this is something I've said to predators. If she started cooking the way you wanted her to cook, and she flinched every time you moved, and she answered your call on the first ring, and she came home as fast as you thought, she get off at 8 o'clock and she's at the door at 8:05. She put everybody in danger trying to speed through traffic. She did everything. You still wouldn't be satisfied. What you're trying to satisfy in you cannot be satisfied by her. You're trying to beat her into becoming your God. You'd have made her your God, and now she can't fit that God-sized void in your heart. And so now you're sitting here, and you feel like the victim. You feel like if she was a better woman. And then you compare your relationship with her with your relationship with Melissa, not understanding that your relationship with Melissa was 2 months long and y'all didn't live together. So of course Melissa made you feel high. She said everything you wanted her to say. Of course you felt that way when you were with Melissa. You never had a chance to really live with her. So now you're comparing yourself and you're putting that down. When you're dealing with somebody who thinks that way, I'm sorry to tell you guys, there is no change for them. It's not to say that they can't change. It is to say that they have to get to the point where they're broken. They have to get to the point where they go and say, I need help. They got to get to the point where they go to the altar and say, I need deliverance. They got to get to the point where they go and say, I keep hitting this woman. And to the abuser, let me tell you how to get free. You got to embarrass yourself. You have to humiliate yourself. That means to humble yourself. Humility, humbling yourself. And humility comes from the word human. It means to go and show people that you are human. That means that if you have people that you love and respect, go to them and say, and I'm talking about non-gospelers, maybe your pastor, I hit my wife yesterday. I need help. I hit her again Thursday. I need help. You need to embarrass yourself till it gets to the point where you don't want to feel that again. See, because when you go to the pastor and you're telling the pastor, I hit her. And when you're talking, you're confessing. That's why the Bible talks about confession. It's a powerful tool. It stops you from blaming her. When you get to that point, you're going to hate the way it feels when that pastor's looking at you, saying you did what? You're going to hate the way that feels. You're not going to want to experience that anymore. So the next time anger comes in, you're going to think about that. You got to put yourself in a spot where you will humiliate yourself. And to the victim, you got to get out of the relationship. It does not get better. I don't care how great of a man he is and what his potential is. And I know you're afraid that if you walk away, he'll reach his potential. And some other woman will come along and enjoy it. And it is possible that he may reach his potential. He may go out and make a lot of money. He may do some great things. But it doesn't mean he's going to be a great man. See, a lot of times you got to understand that whenever a person is broken, whatever is on the inside of them, God snatches platforms and he hides platforms from people who are not ready to stand on them, because what's on the inside of him will begin to express itself once it gets on the platform. I tell the friends in my life, what have you, I tell them, I said, if you're not delivered from always trying to show off your breasts and stuff, God ain't trying to give you a platform, because as soon as he put you on a platform, you're going to put some oil on top of your breast, put on a nice push-up bra, you're going to put on a lowest cut shirt, and you're going to be standing up there on the platform taking pictures and, trying to show off your small waistline, and you always got wine in your hand or some type of alcohol in your hand, and you're promoting the ways of the world. You're promoting what the world says success looks like. So you always want to walk around with friends who are successful and stuff. You're promoting something that God doesn't want to glorify. He said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. What God wants you to do is, if you're in a platform and you're giving him the glory, you're lifting him up and you're bringing more souls to him. And this is the reason why a lot of people are talented. A lot of people are great, but God will hide platforms from them. He will hide opportunities from them, because what's on the inside of them is going to express itself once it gets on the platform. Some things will lay dormant and they will hide until the person gets on the platform. And so I need you to understand that if you're with an abusive man or you're with an abusive woman and you're thinking that, okay, if he makes a little bit more money, if he gets more opportunities, he'll be a great person. No, he's only going to express that abuse more. He's only going to become more abusive, more crazy, or he'll walk away from you because he has an opportunity to kind of level up. understand that relationships, just like we understand that spirits come in ranks, we understand that there are ranks in the realm of the spirit. God has us all in ranks. I need you to understand that there are different ranks of women as well. And so it doesn't mean one woman is greater than the other. It does mean that one woman is seen as better. Culturally speaking, one woman is seen as better than the other. And so some men are used to dating average women or pretty girls or something like that. But there's always that female that they felt like was out of their league. And in their mind, she ranks higher. If you put a broken man on a platform, that woman who never paid attention to him all of a sudden sees him, and for him, he sees an opportunity to get with somebody he ordinarily didn't have an opportunity to get with. I remember ministering to a rapper that I was managing one time. And I remember just talking to him and telling him, because he was a really good guy and he had a wife, and he was telling me about all these girls coming at him. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, were they coming at you before you had this name, and before you were standing on stages and all this other? He was like, no, but you know what I'm saying? Shorty came for me. And I'm just like, do you understand that Shorty don't want nothing to do with you? Shorty is looking at her reflection in the mirror, promising her kids what she's going, the life they're going. This girl don't want you. That girl wants what you have. She wants what you represent. That girl will destroy your marriage for herself. But at the end of the day, once she gets on that platform, if she finds somebody greater than you, if somebody comes and gives her a better, you got to understand what she's doing is a process called climbing. She's climbing a ladder. She ain't climbing a ladder by going to school. She ain't climbing a ladder by starting a business or writing a book. She's climbing a ladder by climbing on top of you. She's climbing. But at the same time, this woman will sit there, lay you down, have your babies, and be there for you, say yes to you, I do, and will fight your enemies, will stand on TV and defend you and do all of that stuff. The whole time she don't like you. The whole time she don't love you. Wait till somebody else comes along who's greater. Wait till somebody who comes along who's greater. And she's going to jump on top of him. The next thing you know, she's going to be giving you a speech. I do love you. But I just feel like it's like when we're together, you don't really talk to me like you used to. And when we're making love, you used to make me feel special. Now I just feel, I don't know. Now I don't know how we get in that, I got over there, but it's just to say, at the end of the day, the predator, it doesn't matter what opportunity he gets, he's going to squander it. He's going to sabotage it. There are a lot of great people out there who have the potential to do great and amazing things, but they will never reach their potential in Christ. They will reach their potential in Satan. They'll reach their potential to murder somebody. That's their greatest potential in Satan. Their greatest potential in Satan is to murder many people. Their greatest potential in Satan is to go out there and destroy the lives of many people. That's their greatest potential in Satan. And so with that being said, guys, I'm going to log off and then come back and do another recording. And we're going to talk about sexual abuse on the other recording. The reason I want to do that is because this one here is almost 3 hours long. The other one, I'm going to try to make it as short as possible, and I need to go change this contact. It's really, really bothering me. But again, I'll just say this before we close out. Make sure you guys come back in. We're going to deal with the whole R. Kelly thing in the next recording or what have you. I do apologize. But make sure that you come back into the next one. But if you're in an abusive relationship, walk away. I want you to understand that to get away from a predator, you have to be desperate. You have to be more desperate than he is to have you. In my life, when I was in the world, this is something that instilled pride in me when I was younger. I just remember my friends used to ask me, and I had all my friends were drop dead gorgeous, and they used to always ask me, what are you doing to these men? Because I was dating some good looking guys. What are you doing to them? Like, what is it about you? And what they were really trying to ask me is, sometimes, let's just be honest, how women think, I look better than you. What is it about you that you can get somebody that fine and he can't let you go? What is it about you? And spiritually, I didn't understand that there were spirits attached to me. And at the same time, I also had some strengths in my personality that worked out well for me. But the thing about it was, I didn't understand what I was attracting to myself when I was younger. I didn't understand the spiritual aspect of what I was dealing with. I didn't understand the call on my life. I didn't understand what God had for me. I was too busy being bound by culture or what have you. But one of the things I had to come to understand is that God whenever he places a call on you, and I don't even remember what I was saying the point was, but when God places a call on your life, when God decides to do something great with you, you're going to attract demonic spirits. You're going to attract good looking, fine, candy coated. You're going to attract candy coated demons. Demons who are wrapped in pretty fat flesh. I want you to understand that demons wear flesh like outfits. Like when I go to a closet, when I go to my closet and I'm getting ready to go to an event, and I'm sitting there looking at my closet, what am I going to wear? I'm trying to figure out what's going to be better suited. Like, okay, what's most comfortable? What do I think everybody else is going to wear? And I'll just say, like when I was younger, I used to try to be the best looking. I want to shine. I want to stand out at this event. And I would go through my closets. Demons do that as well. When a demon is coming to meet you, when a familiar spirit is coming to meet you head on, he wants to pick out it wants to pick out his favorite outfit. So when a demon is trying to get with you, what's his favorite outfit? Whatever uncrucified flesh that there is, whatever man, to the women of God, whatever man looks really good and sounds the best, that's his favorite outfit. You know, what outfit works better for you? You know, he's worn that outfit for like several women. This man out there dating several women, but that's his favorite outfit because he says, this one here, he'll get her. You know, if I go to the party, I go to the date, if I go here and I meet her in this outfit, if I go and I meet her at the park in this outfit, I get her. If I meet her at the park or to the man of God, sometimes to my brothers, and I've said this before, I got 2 uncles who are dead because of bad women. I've seen a lot of men suffer because of bad women. I really have. And for that reason, I tend to be very protective over men as well. I tend to be very protective over the men in my life. But I used to warn my cousins, the thing about a devil, or the thing about a demon, is when it has a female, it'll find the one wrapped the way you want her wrapped, however you want her wrapped. And you got to understand that demons understand this. Demons understand, man of God, what it is that you want for a wife versus what it is that you wouldn't mind having for a whore. They understand fantasy. They look at, just like we have short-term memory and long-term memory, they think along the lines of short-term and long-term. What is it that I want to do? I want to send him a woman that's wrapped in the flesh that fulfills his fantasy. So I'm gonna send him a woman who's curved up the right way, got a nice big butt. She's really seductive, and you know she has those eyes that you can't. Am I gonna send her somebody like that? Am I gonna send him somebody like that? Or do I want to put on my outfit of the wife? I want to put on an outfit where a woman comes along and she appears to be humble. She appears to be everything. Demons like to wear their favorite outfits depending on what their agenda is. They like to wear their favorite outfit depending on what their agenda is, but the way you flush them out is through prayer, fasting, patience, and obedience. Present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and everything else will be added to you. These are the things that you do to flush out demons. You don't get into a relationship and let somebody rush you. You don't get into a relationship and let somebody start pressuring you to say, I love you. If I'm on the phone with somebody for 2 weeks, and I had this happen to me when I was younger a lot, but if I'm on the phone with somebody for 2 weeks and they say, I love you. I know it's a little bit soon, but I love you. Dude, you don't love me. That's that R. Kelly playing in the background. That's this playing in the background. Got you feeling that type of way. You don't love me. You don't know what love is right now. Right now, love means you'll lose your life for me. And I'm not asking you to kill yourself. But love means so much greater than what you're talking about. You're talking about a feeling. And you can always tell when it's not genuine love because a person threatens to sin with you. I want you to have my babies. We're not married. I want you to move in with me. Again, we're not married. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. That's not love. Love never leads you into sin. Love covers, protects, and provides. It never leads you to sin. It leads you away from sin. Never leads you to sin. A lot of times we find ourselves in broken and dysfunctional toxic relationships simply because we don't know what love is. And so make sure you watch my previous recording if you want to know what love is. But because we don't necessarily know what love is, and we get into relationships hoping that the person is going to teach us what love is, and then we jump into the honeymoon stage, we jump into eros. We talked about that in the last recording. We jumped into that high feeling real quick, and then we start going from there, not realizing that it's not love. So let God build the right foundation. Let God give you some functional relationships. Get healed, get delivered. Be honest with people. Confront, the people in your family. Say, hey, this wasn't right. Go ahead and start building the right foundation. Go ahead and start calling things wrong and start calling things right. I got 2 cell phones right here. One of them is working. One of them isn't working. Now, I don't have to put a label on them to know which one, but since they don't look similar, I know which one works and which one does not work. But you can see this case and all this. This is the equivalent of my label. And this right here helps me to know this is an old phone of mine and it doesn't work. I found that in everything, you have to put a label on it to get delivered from it. You have to call some things bad in order to get delivered from them. If you don't call it bad, you won't get free. You'll just be talking about it. You'll be gossiping about it, complaining about it, but you won't get free from it. You have to literally call something bad. Then you have to educate yourself in regards to it. So if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to educate yourself as to why people allow themselves to get abused. This is the reason why counselors are so effective. It's more beneficial to go to a counselor than it is to go to a deliverance minister, but it's also vital to go to a deliverance minister after you've been to a counselor, and to continue going to the counselor after you've gone to the deliverance minister, because the counselor can give you information. This is the thing that helps to keep you free. You need information. You need to be able to say the reason why I allowed this man to hit me, the reason why I'm in this relationship, the reason why I've taken all the stuff that I've taken is because my daddy walked out on me and I saw him hitting my mother. Once you start thinking like that, it helps to change your perspective, and it also helps you to see yourself from, okay, I'm not going to necessarily see him as the victim. I'm not going to necessarily see myself as the victim anymore. I'm going to see myself as a problem. Like, I got problems, I got issues, and I need to go and get free from these issues so that I can be in a long, healthy, functional relationship. That's what you need to do. You need to go out and you need to get information. You need to get healed. You need to get delivered. So anyhow, guys, make sure that you're getting free. We're going to come back and we're going to discuss. And the next one we're going to be doing, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to run to the bathroom and deal with this contact because I don't want it to hurt my eye. I already had eye ulcers before. But give me 5 minutes and we're going to come out, and the next topic what we're going to be doing is a discussion. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit, then I'm going to be answering your questions. We're going to be doing a discussion. We're going to be talking about sexual abuse, this whole thing that's going on with R. Kelly and why it's happening in our community. So give me 5 minutes. I'm going to log out of here. I'm going to launch another YouTube Live. I challenge you to come back on. I know it's late, but I challenge you guys to come back on. I love y'all. Give me 5 minutes and I'll be right back. Bye-bye.